Hey guys, tonight we're not gliding into a gilded hall or slipping into the secrets of a moonlit tower. Tonight, we're following your aching feet as they squelch down to the riverbank, a battered linen bundle digging into your shoulder and the sharp morning air making your nose run. Medieval laundry day has arrived and you probably won't survive this with dry hands, clean boots or a shred of patience. If you think loading a machine is hard, just wait. There's no softener here, only stiff breezes, mud up to your ankles, and a chorus of complaining geese. So, before we go any further, if this quiet space makes you feel even a little less alone, you can like the video and subscribe, but only if it feels right to your heart. And hey, I'd love to know where you're listening from. Are you lying awake in a quiet room at 2 a.m? Or maybe starting your day in a rainy city, eyes still heavy? Drop your time and place in the comments. Let's remind each other we're not alone out here. Now, dim the lights, let your shoulders relax, and let's begin tonight's slow, strange journey. Together, here on Timeless Sleep, you're wading down the same winding path you always do, hem of your only halfway clean tunic dragging through the dew-wet grass. Maybe your neighbours are already gathered by the bend in the river, cackling at something you can't hear, elbows deep in lather, wringing shirts until their knuckles crack. The air's sharp with the tang of wood smoke, but underneath that, you catch a whiff of last week's fish market and something worse. A goose honks disapproval as you edge past, narrowly missing a pile of what you really hope is just mud. No one in your village actually wants laundry duty, but you don't have much of a choice. Clothes don't clean themselves, and every mother, daughter and unlucky son knows the price of letting the filth pile up. Medieval people might have had a reputation for grubbiness, but that's only half the story. They did their best with what little they had. And what they had, you're about to discover, is usually cold, gritty, and riddled with things that want to bite. You reach the riverside, your favourite spot already claimed by a cluster of neighbourly rivals, each guarding their patch of pebbles like hounds over a bone. A couple of older women trade stories in a dialect thicker than porridge, hands moving in a rhythm older than memory. Your own hands sting in the water's icy grip as you start to work, beating the soiled linen against a rounded stone, wishing it would just dissolve and save you the effort. Across the river, a cow moos plaintively, as if mourning your dignity. You try not to look at the steady brown current sliding past. There's a reason most medieval rivers run murky, choked with everything from household refuse to the remains of last week's feast. Fish dart away from your splashing, and now and then a frog's beady eyes break the surface, like it's daring you to come in further. You kneel, and mud squelches up between your toes, seeping through thin shoes. Everyone's seen the warning signs. You might just pick up a washerwoman's knee if you stay here long enough. It's a special kind of ache, starting as a dull throb from kneeling on stones spreading up through the joints. And yet, nobody stops. Clothes must be scrubbed, stains must be beaten out, and the day's laundry can take hours, especially when the whole household's worth of linens, underthings, and mysterious cloth scraps need your attention. Take a look around you, and you'll see an entire microcosm of village life at the riverbank. Some folks mutter about spirits and curses in the water, others just worry about losing a sock to the current, never to be seen again. There's always that one neighbour who pretends she's inventing a new way to scrub a tunic, though it's really just a clever excuse to gossip. The river isn't just for laundry, it's also the town's main sewer, its drinking fountain, and its animal bath, sometimes all at once. Some days, a pig will wander in for a wallow, chasing off the younger children and knocking over a neatly folded heap of still damp linens. And yes, there are eels. They've learned to steer clear of the louder scrubbers, but every now and then, a slimy tail will flick past your wrist, sending your heart straight to your throat. It's a medieval jump scare right when you're most vulnerable. If you're lucky, the weather is on your side. If not, you're huddled under a patchy cloak trying to work between raindrops. The river can swell and surge after a storm, carrying branches, detritus, and occasionally something that looks suspiciously like a hat you lost last winter. Laundry day never waits for fair weather. You scrub, you wring, you hang up the damp rags on thorny bushes, praying the breeze will dry them before the local flock of magpies decides to investigate. You might think looking round that everyone's in the same boat or on the same muddy bank. But there are unspoken rules. Nobles send servants with armloads of fine linen, hoping they'll return whiter than snow, though sometimes the laundry comes back suspiciously patched or missing a button. Ordinary folks have to make do with coarser fabrics, more likely to hold on to their stains, and every so often someone tries to trade a favour for a bit of your precious handmade soap. Speaking of soap, don't get too comfortable yet. Medieval laundry soap isn't the floral-scented bar you might imagine. It's more like a lump of greasy mystery, sometimes made from animal fat, sometimes from leftover cooking oil mixed with ash. You lather it between your palms and feel the grit slide into every crease in your skin. Occasionally someone brags about a secret recipe that's supposed to banish stains, but more often than not it just banishes the top layer of your skin. Quirky superstition time. Some folks believe that if you wash clothes too close to dusk, you risk inviting spirits to hitch a ride in your laundry. That's why you'll hear old women barking at the younger girls to hurry, to finish before the sun drops below the trees. Never mind that the real threat is just catching a chill and spending the night with teeth chattering, limbs aching, and a nasty cough that the village healer will blame on damp humours. Still, better safe than sorry. No one wants to explain to the priest why their best cloak is now haunted. You pause, stretching your aching shoulders, and glance up at the sky, already considering how long it'll take for the clouds to clear and the sun to do its work. Medieval drying isn't a matter of tossing things in a machine and forgetting about them. It's a high-stakes gamble with the weather, the local bird population, and every wandering animal looking for something to chew on. Many a shirt has vanished into the maw of a passing goat, never to return. Laundry day is also a day of unexpected finds. Every once in a while someone will shake out a sleeve and discover a forgotten crust of bread, a ragged note, or, in truly unfortunate cases, a live mouse that's taken up residence in the dirty linen pile. If that doesn't wake you up, nothing will. One neighbour swears her husband's lost coin purse turned up in a sheet she hadn't washed since last Michaelmas. Some people have all the luck. You're not alone in your misery, at least. There's camaraderie in suffering. You trade jibes and stories with the other washerfolk, mocking the village tailor's useless stitches or the priest's mysteriously wine-stained vestments. Sometimes, when the wind is just right, you even sing, a droning tune to keep the rhythm, to keep your spirits up, to remind yourself that you're alive, and that someday this shirt will be clean, even if only for a moment. Occasionally a traveller passes by, marvelling at the spectacle. There's a certain kind of medieval man who considers laundry women's work, and wouldn't dream of lowering himself to the riverside unless his life depended on it. And yet even these lofty types find themselves sooner or later in need of clean undergarments. There are stories of knights on the march who, desperate for a change of shirt, will pay a king's ransom for a fresh tunic. Some say that a battle can be won or lost based on which army smells less like a barnyard. Historians still argue whether laundry logistics decided more than a few medieval campaigns. You work until your arms ache and your fingertips wrinkle, until the pile of soiled clothes becomes a slightly less soiled and very heavy heap ready for the next stage, rinsing, wringing, and the precarious journey home. If you're lucky, nothing falls into the mud on the way back. If you're not, well, sometimes you just shrug, mutter a curse, and decide that a bit of earth never hurt anyone. By now the village dogs have sniffed out the commotion and begun to circle, noses twitching, hoping for scraps or just the thrill of chasing a laundry line. One particularly bold puppy snatches a sock and tears off. A dozen children in hot pursuit. You can't help but laugh, even as you mourn the loss. Laundry day always claims a victim or two. At last, you haul your battered, half-clean clothes up the bank, already dreading the next day, when everything will be dirty again. Your hands sting, your back protests every step, but there's a strange satisfaction in seeing the sun catch the ripples on a line of damp tunics, fluttering in the breeze. It's not perfect, it's not easy, but for one shining moment you've wrestled a bit of order from the muck and that has to count for something. You trudge home, mud-caked and exhausted, and just for a heartbeat, you wonder what it would be like to live in a world where the laundry does itself. Maybe, somewhere in the distant future, they'll invent a machine for this. Until then, you're stuck with the river, the stones, and your own two tired hands. You're still sore from yesterday, and your hands are rough as old rope, but the pile of laundry never stops growing. Today's special misery, soap-making day. If you think laundry is bad, try whipping up a fresh batch of medieval soap, which is about as gentle on your skin as a vinegar bath and just as fragrant. You drag yourself over to the makeshift washhouse behind your cottage, where smoke always curls up from the roof and neighbours' warnings float through the air. Don't get the lie in your eyes unless you want to look like old Agnes. Let's talk about the soap you're about to use. You're not dabbing lavender-scented bubbles on delicate linen here. Your recipe calls for ashes, water, and whatever leftover animal fat you managed to scrape from the cooking pot. You stare into a cracked wooden bucket, where last night's grease floats on cloudy water, and try not to gag. This is the real magic of medieval cleaning. A greasy caustic mess called lye, brewed from wood ash and left to stew in the open air until it's strong enough to eat through a tunic and most of your patience. You reach for a bundle of dry wood, crumbling it into a barrel as fine grey dust wafts into your nose. The oldest, driest logs make the best ash, and every family has its own theory on how long to soak it. Some say a day, others swear by a week. Historians still argue whether different regions had their own secret lye recipes, or if the whole process was just a case of throw in what you've got and pray for rain. You toss a handful of straw into the fire, watching the flames leap, and then scrape the ash into the barrel, adding just enough water to turn it into a soupy sludge. Now comes the dangerous part, stirring the lye. You take a stick and swirl it gently, careful not to splash, though you know some will inevitably end up on your skin, leaving tiny white burns that will sting for days. It's almost a point of pride how many lye scars a seasoned washer can show off. You know what they say, a hand without lye burns is a hand that's never worked a real wash. The smell is enough to make your eyes water. It's a sharp, acrid odour that lingers in your hair and soaks into your clothes. You remember the first time you caught a whiff as a child, how you ran from the washhouse, eyes streaming, swearing you'd never return. Of course, here you are, older, wiser, and just as miserable as every washer who came before you. Once the lye is ready, it's time to add the fat. You scoop lumps of tallow from a pot, half melted and yellow, and drop them into the lye, where they fizz and spit like angry spirits. Stirring is an ordeal. If you stop for too long, the whole mess congeals, but if you go too fast, it boils over, threatening to leave new scars on your wrists. It's an endless dance, a test of patience, and your only reward is a greasy grey lump that will somehow manage to strip even the most stubborn stains from your clothes. You break off a chunk of the finished soap and run it between your fingers. It's gritty, rough, and smells faintly of smoked meat. Nothing like the perfumed bars from the merchant stall in the market, which you could never afford anyway. If you're lucky, you have enough soap to share with your neighbour. If not, you hope she's not too upset when you borrow a bit from her drying rack later. Once you've gathered your tools, you make your way to the riverbank again. Today the sun is out, and you can almost believe you'll get your laundry dried before nightfall. The other washerfolk are already there, sleeves rolled up, faces set in grim determination. Someone cracks a joke about the last time old Agnes dropped her soap in the river, how it floated away, leaving her cursing and half the village laughing. You can't help but smile. If you don't laugh, you'll cry. Laundry is a social event in its own twisted way. Everyone knows everyone else's business, and secrets have a way of bubbling up along with the soap suds. You kneel beside your favourite flat stone and start scrubbing, dipping the linen into the river, then working the homemade soap deep into the fabric. The lye burns, making your hands itch, but you grit your teeth and keep going. Cleanliness might not be next to godliness in the Middle Ages, but it's certainly close to sanity. The soap hisses as it meets the water, sending up clouds of suds that float downriver. You watch as a curious duck noses through the foam, then flaps away, offended by the taste. You wonder, not for the first time, how much of the river's murkiness comes from all the soap and lye dumped in day after day. There's a rumour, half believed, half dismissed, that fish caught downstream taste a little funny, their flesh tinged with the tang of wood ash. Maybe it's true, maybe it's just another riverside myth. Historians still argue about how much environmental damage was caused by medieval laundry routines. You rub, scrub, and beat the linen, your arms aching as you work out stubborn stains. Some folks swear by secret remedies, scrubbing with sand, pounding with sticks, or even adding a splash of sour milk for the really nasty spots. There's a whole world of fringe laundry lore passed down from grandmother to granddaughter, and everyone has an opinion on the right way to do it. Once, a neighbour tried cleaning her husband's tunic with boiled nettles. He claimed it kept away the lice, but everyone else noticed he started sleeping in the barn. A sudden splash interrupts your thoughts. A frog, bold and green, lands squarely on your clean sheet, leaving muddy prints in its wake. You sigh, pick it up gently, and set it back in the reeds. There's always something to complicate the day's work. If it's not the animals, it's the weather. You scan the horizon for rain clouds, knowing a sudden downpour could undo hours of effort. Your soap is running low, so you ration what you have left, scrubbing hardest where the stains are darkest and hoping the river will do the rest. The lye bites at your skin, leaving red streaks, but you push through. Clean clothes are a luxury, one you can't afford to waste. There's an old saying in the village: a clean shirt is worth a good night's sleep. You're not sure you believe it, but you cling to the hope all the same. As you work, the riverbank fills with laughter and voices. Someone's toddler toddles too close to the water, and a mother calls out, warning of river spirits. There's a story told to scare children. If you get too close, a hand will reach up and pull you in, never to be seen again. You know it's nonsense, but on lonely evenings, you sometimes catch yourself glancing over your shoulder, just in case. A merchant passes by, heading to the next village. He pauses to watch the spectacle, shaking his head at the sight of so many women and a few reluctant men, knee-deep in the river, fighting with their laundry. He mutters something about city folk and how they'd never last a day in the countryside. You wonder if he's right. You wouldn't trade your life for his, not for all the silver in his purse. Someone else jokes that laundry is the only time anyone can talk about their neighbour's dirty linen without starting a fight. There's some truth to it. You know who skips wash day, whose clothes are always missing, who's wearing the same tunic for the third week in a row. It's a community built on shared suffering and the hope that just this once, the river will wash away not only the stains but the worries clinging to your mind. As the sun climbs higher, your arms grow heavy and your back begins to ache. You take a break, sitting on a smooth stone and dipping your feet in the cold water. You flex your fingers, wincing at the red, raw skin. The older women say you'll grow calluses, that someday you won't even feel the burn. You're not so sure. You look at the river, at the piles of laundry lined up on the bank, and you can't help but marvel at how much effort it takes just to keep the world a little cleaner. In some ways, you think, laundry is a metaphor for life in the Middle Ages, messy, exhausting, and never really finished. You wash, you scrub, you rinse, but there's always another shirt, another stain, another day to get through. A breeze picks up and you hang the cleanest pieces on low branches, praying the sun will dry them quickly. You keep an eye out for birds. They love to peck at damp linen, leaving little holes that grow bigger with every wash. You sigh and hope you'll have enough time to mend them before the next laundry day. You think about all the little tricks you've learned over the years, using cold water for bloodstains, never scrubbing too hard or you'll wear a hole straight through. Some people swear by adding herbs to the rinse water, lavender, thyme, anything that might mask the harsh smell of lye. You tried it once, but your clothes came out smelling like soup. Still, you admire their optimism. The riverbank becomes a stage, each washer a performer in a never-ending play. There's drama, comedy, even the occasional tragedy when someone loses a prize shirt to the current. One time, a neighbour's best tablecloth drifted away, never to be seen again. She mourned it for weeks, insisting she could still see it, ghost-like, every time the moonlight hit the water just right. Laundry day is a study in patience. You wait for the soap to work, for the stains to fade, for the sun to dry your clothes. You wait for the aches in your arms to ease, for the laughter of your friends to dull the monotony. You wait for the day when, maybe, just maybe, laundry won't be such a brutal chore. You listen to the older women swap stories about the best ways to make soap. One swears by pig fat, another by sheep, and a third claims that only the ashes of applewood give you a truly clean finish. Historians still argue about which recipe was most popular, but you suspect it was more about what was available than any real science. You nod along, pretending to take notes, but you know you'll use whatever you can find. You gather your finished laundry, now clean, or at least cleaner than before, and start the long walk home. You pause to look back at the river, now sparkling in the afternoon sun, and feel a strange sense of pride. It's not easy, but you've done it. You've beaten back the filth, if only for a day. As you trudge home, a neighbour calls out, teasing you about the patch on your sleeve. You laugh, knowing tomorrow you'll return the favour. There's comfort in the routine, in the shared struggle, in knowing you're not alone. Back at your cottage, you hang the last damp shirt by the fire, hoping it will be dry by morning. You collapse onto your straw mattress, arms throbbing, but your heart a little lighter. Clean clothes, clean conscience, clean start. At least until the next laundry day. By now your knees are familiar with the rocky riverbank, your fingers move almost automatically, and your sense of smell has all but surrendered. But just when you think you've figured out the brutal rhythm of medieval laundry, someone drops a word that makes everyone's head turn. Fulling. Fulling. If the word makes you picture gentle hand-washing, think again. In the world of medieval textile care, it's about as glamorous as plunging your feet into a vat of old urine and stomping till your toes wrinkle. And that's not just a punchline, that's the daily grind for a class of people known as fullers, men, women, even children in some regions, tasked with turning woolen cloth from greasy, matted mess into something you might actually want to wear. You find yourself wandering past the village fulling mill, drawn by the rhythmic slap-slosh of soaked wool and the low, resigned grumbling of the workers. The air here is unique. Imagine a mixture of sheep, sweat, wet hay, and the sharp bite of ammonia, and you're only halfway there. The fullers themselves barely notice anymore. They're used to the stink, the constant dampness, and the way their skin seems to never truly dry out. Even in summer, a fuller's hands are rough and red, the nails rimmed with grey from hours spent in troughs of what they politely call wash. So what's fulling really? It's the medieval process of cleansing woolen cloth after it's been woven, stripping out oils, dirt and the last stubborn flecks of lanolin. The traditional recipe? Mix water, thick wool, and a generous helping of stale urine. Human or animal, take your pick. The ammonia works wonders on greasy fibres. Your job, if you were unlucky enough to be born into the trade, is to stomp and knead the cloth until it's soft, strong, and ready for the tailor. There's an almost hypnotic rhythm to it. Foot, foot, shift, turn. If you listen long enough, the fulling mill's churn could nearly lull you to sleep, if not for the smell. Local law says that the best fullers can recognise whose urine is in the mix by scent alone. That's probably just bravado, but in a world with precious few amusements, you have to take pride where you can find it. And why, you might ask, did they use urine in the first place? It's the ammonia content which helps strip away oil and dirt, leaving the wool fluffy and bright. Some towns kept communal urine pots on street corners, and everyone was expected to donate now and then. Children dared each other to be the first to pee in the pot each morning, and a house with a steady supply of chamber pots might have a side income selling their product to the fullers. It's the medieval version of recycling, and it really puts the public in public works. Sometimes the mill is powered by hand, with people slogging barefoot in troughs from sunrise to sunset. In larger towns, clever engineers harness a water wheel to turn massive wooden hammers pounding the cloth in an endless echoing racket. It's backbreaking, repetitive work, but at least it spares your feet a little wear and tear. Of course, it's not without danger. There's a local legend about a fuller who dozed off in the trough and woke up half an hour later, feet pruny and heart pounding, convinced he'd dreamed of rivers made of vinegar. Some say that if you fall asleep during the night shift, the mill's ghosts will sneak up and dye your hair with blue woad. Historians still argue whether any fullers were actually caught napping, but the threat alone is enough to keep most workers upright and blinking, even when exhaustion drags at their eyelids. You pause by the trough and watch the fullers at work. Their feet churn, their hands knead, and sometimes, when the headman isn't looking, they splash each other in a show of grim camaraderie. One woman pulls a face and waves a rag at you, daring you to step closer. "Care for a dip?" she laughs, and you shake your head, grateful that your own laundry, for all its hardships, doesn't require you to swim in a pool of old chamber pot stew. But it's not just the physical hardship. There's a pecking order here, and fullers are rarely at the top. Despite how crucial their work is, the difference between a scratchy sackcloth tunic and something you can wear with pride. Most people turn up their noses at the profession. Stories circulate about the health risks, cracked skin, lingering coughs, odd rashes, and that constant, unshakable scent. It clings even after you've left the mill behind. Children sometimes make up rhymes about fullers' feet, and even the local dogs hesitate to beg for scraps from their table. You look around and notice how the fullers keep to themselves. They share a special kind of humour, jokes about whose boots are the most waterproof, or who lost a toe to frostbite last winter. One old man winks and tells you the only thing worse than working in a fulling mill is trying to court someone after a 12-hour shift. You get used to the smell, he claims, but no one else ever does. Still, there's pride here too. When a piece of cloth emerges from the trough, newly bright, soft and shorn of its grime, it's like magic. Merchants come from miles around to buy cloth that's been properly fulled, because everyone knows you can spot an unfulled tunic by the greasy sheen that never quite goes away. Even the local lord, who pretends not to notice the stench, makes sure his best cloaks spend a night or two in the mill before the next feast. You can't help but marvel at the contradictions. The fuller's work is dirty, thankless, and poorly paid, but it's absolutely essential. Historians still debate whether the fullers were truly shunned, or if people secretly respected them from a distance. After all, everyone needs clean, soft cloth, but no one wants to think too much about how it's made. It's a strange kind of invisibility, and you feel it in the way people pass the mill with eyes averted, only to show up at payday, smiling and grateful when their order is ready. There's a peculiar pride in surviving the worst the job can offer. Old fullers show off their scars, their missing teeth, their bent fingers. They tell stories about the harsh winters when the mill froze solid, about the spring floods that sent wool floating downriver. One woman insists she once saw a fish try to wriggle its way out of a pile of cloth. Couldn't blame it, she shrugs, would have traded places in a heartbeat. Amid all the hardship, there are moments of humour and kindness. The mill is a place for secrets. Everyone's too tired to keep up pretences. People confess dreams, sorrows and hopes in the half-darkness, voices muffled by the slap of water and wool. One man says he's saving up to buy his own loom. Another dreams of escaping to the city, where the laundry is someone else's problem. You realise that, in its own way, this place is as much a heart of the community as the church or the market square. Of course, you can't stay forever. Laundry waits, and your own chores call you back. As you leave, the fullers wave, a little mockingly perhaps, but with genuine warmth. You breathe deep, and the smell follows you halfway home, clinging to your skin and hair. You promise yourself a bath, but know you'll settle for a quick rinse and a change of shirt. You walk along the village path thinking about how many layers of labour go into every piece of clothing. It's easy to forget, in a world without washing machines or gentle detergents, just how much sweat and skill are needed to keep the dirt at bay. Fullers may not get parades or feast day honours, but without them, no one would look or feel quite right. Evenings, when the work is done, the fullers gather by the fireside, drinking weak ale and telling tales. Some say their trade will never change, others whisper about strange new ideas from distant towns. In Italy, rumour has it, they're experimenting with different chemicals and even plant-based soaps. Historians still argue whether these innovations reached England, or if most people stuck with tried-and-true urine, ash, and elbow grease. You watch the firelight flicker on tired faces and wonder what the future will bring. Maybe, someday, people will tell stories about the old days, when laundry meant a day in the fulling mill and anyone could tell a fuller by the lines on their hands. For now, you're grateful to slip into your half-clean tunic, still damp but blissfully free of sheep smell, and know that at least for tonight you can rest easy. And as you close your eyes, drifting off to the slow music of the river and the muffled laughter from the mill, you can't help but hope tomorrow's laundry will be a little lighter, a little easier, and maybe, just maybe, a little less pungent. You wake with the faint ache of yesterday's work echoing through your limbs, the memory of soap and river and rough cloth still lingering under your nails. Laundry is never really done in the Middle Ages. It's only paused, waiting to ambush you again. Today the air is heavy and sticky, but there's a nervous energy buzzing through the village because it's one of those rare communal wash days. Every family in town is expected at the water's edge, and that means more than double the drama. The riverbank, when you arrive, is already teeming with people, children, adults, and the occasional sheep that's managed to escape its pen. Some folks are hauling piles of muddy linens, others just a handful of fine cloth napkins, but all are eyeing each other warily. Everyone wants the flattest stones, the deepest patch of current, and the spot with the least amount of floating debris. If you're late, you might be stuck downstream where the water's already cloudy and the best you can hope for is to chase the dirt around in circles. There's a strange competitive spirit to these mass washings, like a sport no one wants to admit they're playing. You spot the steely-eyed matron from the far end of the village, the one who always brags about her dazzling whites. She's already staked out the prime territory, her elbows sharp as she defends her domain from upstart neighbours. You squeeze into a space between two other families, doing your best not to crowd, but before you know it, elbows are bumping and buckets are jostling for position. Someone's child drops a basket, sending half a week's worth of socks tumbling down the embankment and into the water. The chorus of groans and laughter is equal parts sympathy and schadenfreude. Nobody can help, but everyone watches. It's not just the grown-ups who get in each other's way. The children, freed from their usual chores, take the opportunity to splash, shriek, and invent new games, involving muddy water and whatever floats. Before long, more than one shirt is sacrificed to a tug of war, and someone's best bonnet goes sailing down the current like a ship lost at sea. Some of the parents scold, but most give up, secretly glad for an excuse not to chase every piece of laundry as it vanishes. Washing itself quickly becomes an all-out competition. Who can scrub the hardest? Who can wring the most water out? Who can shout the loudest when they think someone else's laundry is drifting too close? Accusations fly. "You're splashing dirt on my whites! That's not your stone, it's mine! Keep your dog away from my drying sheet!" For all the jokes and stories told around the fire about village unity, Laundry Day exposes every simmering tension. Tempers flare, and it's not uncommon for sharp words, or even sharper slaps, to be exchanged. Someone's cousin mutters about a feud that's lasted since last harvest, all because of a borrowed shirt returned with an unfixable stain. "Worse than the 100 Years' War," she whispers, and a few heads nod in agreement. It's the kind of drama that no town crier would ever dare mention, but everyone knows, and everyone remembers. At some point someone starts singing, partly to distract from the squabbling, partly because old habits die hard. Songs drift down the river, old work tunes about love and loss, and newer ditties making gentle fun of those who scrub but never rinse, or rinse but never really scrub. Laughter follows, and you realise it's not all bad. These clashes are part of the rhythm of the place, as woven into the fabric of the community as any embroidered edge. Still, the practical risks of a crowded riverbank are real, A misplaced elbow can send a heavy wooden bucket tumbling into the water, nearly braining someone downstream. More than once you see two neighbours lunge for the same stone, arms tangled, linen forgotten as each tries to reclaim their territory. The loser stomps away in a huff, muttering about bad luck and worse manners. Of course, the physical work doesn't let up just because there's extra company. In fact, the pressure is on to outshine everyone else. You double your efforts, knuckles whitening as you knead lye-soaked linen against the rock, glancing sideways to make sure your nemesis isn't getting ahead. Sweat beads on your brow, trickling into your eyes, but you ignore it. No way will you be the one with a half-clean tunic. All the while, the river keeps rolling by, indifferent to the human drama at its banks. Here and there, a goose or a stray dog wades into the fray, setting off shrieks and more arguments as laundry is scattered and carefully laid out drying cloths are sent flying. You can't help but laugh when a particularly adventurous rooster manages to snag a ribbon and make a break for it, chased by a mob of giggling children. Historians still debate whether laundry days were really as chaotic as some sources suggest. Was every communal wash a battlefield, or were there times of peace, even friendship between neighbours? Maybe both are true. In your experience, no two laundry days are ever the same. Some end in silence, others in song, and a few with someone nursing a bruised ego or a bruised arm. The competitive spirit extends to the drying lines. Once the washing is done, you must battle for space on the best bushes and fences, everyone elbowing for the sunniest spot. The cleverest among you staked out territory with baskets or sticks before you even began. The rest must make do, draping shirts and dresses wherever there's room, and hoping the wind doesn't carry them away before they're dry. As the day wears on, the initial excitement fades, replaced by a kind of weary truce. Some neighbours trade tips, others share stories or swap soap for favours. You overhear a whispered secret about who's courting whom, and who's been caught borrowing someone else's fine linen for church. By late afternoon, most of the tempers have cooled, replaced by the camaraderie of shared exhaustion. Still, the memory of earlier scuffles lingers. You see it in the way some families pointedly ignore each other, or the sideways glances exchanged over particularly stubborn stains. Everyone wants to present a spotless face to the village, not just in clothing, but in reputation. That's the real battle being fought on the riverbank, not just who has the cleanest shirt, but who can claim the highest ground in the endless contest for social standing. It's not just about pride, though. There's genuine practical danger in crowded wash spots. Accidents happen. Someone's foot slips on a slick rock, and they tumble into the shallows, soaking their last clean shift. A cry goes up, and for a moment, all the squabbling stops as half a dozen hands reach out to pull the unlucky washer to safety. The river can be cruel, even in shallow water. Stories abound of broken ankles, twisted wrists, and, in the worst cases, someone being swept away by an unexpected current. The riverbank itself bears the scars of centuries of use. The once smooth stones are worn to a polish, the grass trampled into muddy ruts. In some places, the earth is pitted and uneven from generations of eager hands digging for the best rocks, or from sudden scuffles that left lasting marks. Local superstition holds that the ghosts of past quarrels still haunt the riverbank, lurking in the shadows, waiting to trip the unwary. Children dare each other to linger after sunset, but few have the nerve to stay once the last load is hung to dry. Lunch breaks are taken in shifts, with small clusters gathered around hunks of coarse bread and bits of cheese. Someone always brings a flask of weak ale, passed around in companionable silence. In these moments, the worst of the morning's drama is set aside, at least until someone notices a missing shirt or a suspicious spot that looks like it came from a neighbour's muddy shoes. Afternoon wears on, and tempers begin to fray anew as tired arms grow clumsy and patience runs thin. You hear a muffled sob from the far end of the line, where a young girl is trying, and failing, to wash out a stain left by spilled berry juice. Her mother scolds her in hushed tones, promising that next time she'll wear her old dress to the fields. Nearby, another woman mutters about her husband's inability to keep a shirt clean for more than a day. You glance down at your own hands, red and rough from hours in the water, and feel a strange mixture of pride and resignation. Laundry is a test of patience, of strength, of neighbourly goodwill, and some days you pass with flying colours, while others leave you wishing for a miracle. You wonder if things are different in other villages, or if, everywhere, the Riverbank is a stage for the same dramas, played out in different costumes. The sun starts to dip behind the trees, casting long shadows across the water. One by one, families begin to gather their things, shaking out the last damp garments and bundling them for the walk home. There's a flurry of goodbyes, some warm, some grudging, and a final round of jokes about whose washing will dry fastest. You linger, enjoying the rare peace that comes when the crowd thins and the river flows untroubled for a little while. On your walk back, you hear snatches of conversation, promises to do better next time, complaints about missing soap, and vows to never ever let anyone borrow a washing stone again. But by the time you reach your own cottage, arms loaded with bundles, most of the morning's tension has faded into the background, replaced by the comforting ache of honest work. As you hang your clothes to finish drying by the fire, you can't help but reflect on the day's battles, fought not just with dirt and stains, but with neighbours, rivals, and occasionally friends. Tomorrow everyone will nod politely, pretending nothing happened, but you'll all remember. That's the way of the village. Forgiveness is as fleeting as a clean shirt and just as hard won. You collapse into your chair, letting the warmth seep into your bones, and think, not for the first time, that laundry is never just laundry. It's the pulse of the community, the measure of pride and patience, the secret source of half the village gossip. And as you drift into a light doze, soothed by the crackle of the fire and the soft flutter of clean linen, you realise that, for better or worse, you wouldn't trade it for any other life. Morning creeps over the village rooftops, and you wake with a heaviness already curled in your spine. Laundry is more than a task, it's a test, a battle between muscle and mud, between your will and the relentless grinding labour that never quite seems to end. Today, it's just you and your heap of dirty linens, bundled tight and bulging with the secrets of a week's worth of living. Some weeks you wonder if your clothes are simply breeding new stains in the night. Nothing stays clean for long in a world built of wood, soil and smoke. You gather your laundry basket, a rough-woven thing that snagged your fingers 1,000 times, and set out along the familiar winding path toward the river. The air is thick with the earthy tang of dawn, dew beading on every leaf, and birds calling out over the fields. Each step feels heavier than the last, but you know you're not alone in your fatigue. All along the lanes and alleyways, women trudge the same path, carrying burdens just like yours. A few younger boys are sent along, faces crumpled with dread at the thought of scrubbing their own shirts. If anyone claims not to mind laundry, they're either lying or too young to remember the real ache of it. Arriving at the riverbank, you take a moment to watch the water moving slow and brown. Laundry is an act of faith, really. Faith that the river will be high enough, the sun hot enough, your hands strong enough. The tools of your trade are simple: a flat stone, a sturdy stick, your own aching arms, and maybe a wooden washing paddle if you're lucky enough to own one. You glance at your hands, raw knuckles, scabbed wrists, and red fingers swollen from yesterday's wash, and wonder how many more years they'll hold up. The labour starts with sorting, an art and a risk in itself. Undergarments and work shirts are thick with sweat and filth. Table linens bear the evidence of too many meals, from oily gravy to spilled ale, and the mysterious stains that appear whenever children are near. The worst is the woolen outer garments, heavy, dense and slow to dry. Their weave hiding layers of grime and the faint scent of wood smoke that never quite leaves. There's no room for squeamishness. By midday, every secret your family's clothing holds will be on display. Blood from a scraped knee, grass stains from a tumble, the inevitable mystery blotch that defies all explanation. You kneel, shifting your weight on the cool stone and set to work. The technique is simple but brutal. First, Soak each garment in a river water until it's saturated and heavy. Then, lather the worst spots with your gritty, stinging soap, made of fat and ash and anything else you could scrounge. You beat the fabric against the stone, folding and unfolding, wringing until the veins in your arms stand out like cords. The slap of wet cloth echoes down the riverbank, a rhythm older than memory, a reminder that you're never really alone out here. Backbreaking work is the rule, not the exception. You feel every muscle tighten as you twist and pound the laundry. The pain is sharp, then dull, then sharp again, as each repetitive movement wears away at your endurance. Sometimes you stop and shake out your arms, flexing stiff fingers. Old washerwomen claim their knuckles grow larger with every passing year, the bones shaped by decades of labour. Maybe it's true. Your hands already don't look like the soft, nimble ones you remember from girlhood. Some women use a wooden paddle or beetle, a thick stick for hammering the worst stains from heavy cloth. The repetitive thudding is both satisfying and exhausting, a steady percussion that carries down the bank. Others prefer a stone, its surface worn smooth by generations of scrubbing. Either way, the real tool is sheer determination. There's no trick to it except not stopping. In the midst of your scrubbing, you look up to see your neighbour, Marta, grimacing as she bends over her own pile. Her back is stooped from years of this same labour, her hands gnarled as old roots. She catches your eye and grins, a flash of gold where a tooth used to be. They say this is good for the soul, she calls, or maybe just for keeping us out of trouble. The two of you share a laugh, the sound brittle but genuine. The day wears on and the pain deepens. Shoulders burn, knees throb, and the relentless flexing of your wrists sends little bolts of pain shooting up your arms. You pause only to stretch or to rub life back into your fingers. It's not just the washing either. Lifting heavy, sopping cloth, wringing it dry and then hoisting it onto a bush or line to dry. Every stage takes strength you barely feel you possess. No one asks if you're tired. Everyone is tired. You just keep going. Historians still argue whether medieval washerwomen faced a higher risk of injury than women in other trades. Some say the endless bending and twisting led to lifelong back problems, washerwoman's knee, and even arthritis before 30. Others argue that the camaraderie and laughter shared on the riverbank helped ease the pain, though you have your doubts on days like this. There are, of course, hazards beyond the merely physical. Riverbanks are rarely flat and welcoming. A misstep can send you sliding into the shallows, or tumbling onto a hidden stone, leaving bruises or worse. Stories circulate, whispered warnings about those who broke an ankle or cut a foot on something sharp buried in the mud. You keep a careful eye out as you move, hoping your luck will hold. Every so often you pause to inspect your work. Clean is a relative concept here. Spotless whites are a myth, except for the very wealthy who can afford endless hours and endless servants. For most, clean means the worst of the grime is gone, the stains faded to a memory, and the scent of river and ash has replaced the sourness of sweat. It's enough. It has to be. You wring out each piece with all your strength, twisting until water drips down your arms and soaks into your skirt. The act is both mechanical and mindful, your mind wandering as your body works. You think about everything and nothing. The price of bread, the rumours of plague in the next county, the promise of a feast day only if there's time to finish the work. Children run past shrieking as they chase a dog that's stolen someone's undergarment. The old jokes echo. Laundry day claims another victim. But mostly the riverbank is filled with the quiet, gritted sound of determination. Laughter bubbles up now and then, but it's quieter, tinged with fatigue. Lunch is a rough affair, cheese and hard bread eaten with wet fingers, a few sips of cold water from a shared jug. If you're lucky, someone passes around a sweet from the market, or a handful of wild berries. No one lingers long, there's too much work to do. By the time you stand up again, your muscles have started to stiffen, making the second half of the day even harder than the first. In the distance you hear the bell from the church tower, no rest for the weary, but a reminder that you're still part of the world beyond the river. For a moment you look up at the clouds, watching them drift, and imagine a day when laundry will be something you barely remember, a chore lost to the ages. But you're pulled back by a sharp sting as your knuckles brush the stone, another scrape to join the rest. You rub your sore hand and get back to work because that's what must be done. There's no magic here, only the relentless, ordinary miracle of effort. By mid-afternoon, your back feels as if it's fused in place. You straighten slowly, wincing, and stretch your aching limbs. The work isn't done, not even close, but you take a moment to survey your progress. Piles of damp laundry, some almost clean, wait for their turn in the sun. You trudge over to the nearest bush, draping each piece with care, hoping the breeze will help speed the drying. Sometimes the local children will help, stringing ropes between trees for extra drying space. More often, it's a game of chance. Who will lose a shirt to a sudden gust or an overeager goat? You glance over at Marta again and she shakes her head ruefully. "If only our husbands worked as hard as we do out here," she mutters. The others within earshot laugh, and someone suggests that next time the men can take over while the women sit in the shade and drink ale. The fantasy lasts only a moment before the reality of wet, heavy linens draws you back in. The aches and pains of laundry day are legendary. In some villages there are home remedies passed down for generations. Herbal salves for cracked knuckles, warm cloths wrapped around aching joints, or a hot bath, if you're very lucky, at the end of the day. More often, you just live with it, knowing that the pain is part of the work and the work is never done. There are stories too, tales told by firelight about women who found secret ways to make the chore easier. Some claim that chanting certain rhymes while scrubbing will make the stains vanish faster. Others whisper that washing at sunrise when the world is still quiet will keep your back from seizing up. Maybe it's all superstition, or maybe it's just the human desire to believe there's some magic to be found in the mundane. You wonder if things will ever change, if someday there'll be a way to keep clean without all this suffering. But for now, you accept the aches, the weariness, and even the little moments of laughter shared on the riverbank. It's not easy, and it's never finished, but it's yours, and as sleep finally drags you under, you dream of water and stone and the slow, steady strength it takes to keep your world turning, one brutal wash at a time. The cold creeps in before dawn, curling beneath the door, turning the air in your small cottage sharp and thin. You know it before you even open your eyes. Laundry waits, and this time it's winter's grip that will test you. Every muscle aches from yesterday, but you pull yourself from the straw mattress and dress in layers, shivering as you fumble for your roughest woolen shawl. You know how quickly the heat from the hearth disappears out there by the river. Every washerwoman dreads laundry in winter, the season when even the bravest hands hesitate before plunging into the icy water. There's no time to dawdle. If you wait, the sun will rise, but its weak warmth won't do much. The best chance for drying is a rare patch of midday sun and a stiff, biting wind. Though more often than not, the wind just slices through your clothes and into your bones. You gather your armful of laundry, wrapping it in a thick blanket to keep what little warmth it holds, and set off down the path. The grass crunches underfoot, white with frost, and your breath hangs in the air like a ghost. The river, when you reach it, is rimmed in delicate ice, and the stones are slick and treacherous. The brave or desperate have already arrived, blowing on their hands and stamping their feet. You find your spot, grateful for a moment's warmth from the movement, and brace yourself for what's to come. Some mornings you have to break the ice with a stick before you can even begin. The shards float in the current, catching the pale sunlight, and you steel yourself against the shock of the cold. Your first plunge is always the worst, a jolt that stings every nerve in your hands, racing up your arms like fire made of needles. The water numbs you quickly, but not before you gasp and bite your lip, determined not to let anyone see the tears that prick your eyes. No one laughs, everyone here knows the pain. You dip your clothes, one at a time, into the frigid river, feeling the ache settle into your bones. If you're not careful, you'll lose all feeling in your fingers, a real danger, as more than one woman has learned the hard way. Historians still argue whether frostbite was common among medieval washerwomen. Some say yes, pointing to old records of missing fingers and hands crippled by cold. Others insist the tales are exaggerated, that most simply worked faster or took frequent breaks. What's undeniable is the risk. Numb hands mean you can't feel the stones, can't tell when you're about to cut yourself or lose your grip on a precious piece of linen. Despite the misery, you press on. The water is your enemy and your only hope, the same as it is in every season. Today, though, your movements are slower, more deliberate. Every garment is stiffer, the dirt more stubborn in the cold. You scrub anyway, knowing that stains set deeper in winter, and that a careless wash now will only mean more work later. Around you, the other washer folk mutter curses or sing under their breath, desperate to keep spirits up. Someone starts a song about spring, about flowers and warm breezes and picnics by the river. The irony is sharp, but for a moment it almost helps. You catch yourself humming along, if only to keep your teeth from chattering. Your own clothing, layered and heavy, grows damp around the edges, wicking up the water that splashes from the stones. There's no way to avoid it. You resign yourself to being cold and wet for the rest of the day. The wind cuts through your shawl, and the world seems reduced to the circle of stone, water, and aching hands. Drying laundry in winter is a challenge all its own. The sun is weak and low in the sky, the air too damp to steal much moisture. You spread your washing on bushes or hang it from any available line, watching with resignation as the fabric stiffens in the wind, freezing solid before it can dry. You remember last year, when a particularly harsh frost left all your best linen as stiff as boards, and you had to bring them inside and thaw them by the fire for hours before you could fold them. There are tricks for winter drying, some passed down for generations. One neighbour swears by laying clothes on flat stones, letting the little heat from the earth seep up from below. Another insists on wringing everything twice, even if it means hands raw and burning. You try every method you know, desperate to get at least a few pieces dry enough to wear. The fear of illness is always close by. Wet clothes and cold bodies are a recipe for fever, and everyone knows someone who's fallen ill after a winter wash. Coughs linger, joints ache, and every little chill is a reminder that warmth is precious, and health even more so. You catch yourself worrying about your own family, making a mental note to keep a few dry rags aside for the youngest, no matter how much work it takes. Lunch, if it comes, is a cold affair, a hunk of bread, a slice of cheese, hands too numb to feel the crust. You eat quickly, teeth chattering, and get back to work. The only relief comes from the rare moments when the sun breaks through the clouds, warming your back for just a minute or two. In those moments, you close your eyes and remember summer, when laundry was a burden, but not a torment. By midday, your resolve is beginning to crack. The river is colder now than when you started, the stones slicker. You glance around and see that others are slowing too, faces pale and lips blue. Still, no one gives up, not because they're strong, but because they must. Laundry is a necessity, and no season, not even winter, can put it off forever. You do your best to hurry, but there's only so much you can do. The cold saps your strength, making every movement slower, every mistake more likely. Once you drop a shirt into the river and nearly cry, knowing you'll have to chase it downstream, hands plunging again into the icy water. At home, you have a few tricks to help finish the job, hanging damp clothes by the hearth, spreading them on benches, even tucking smaller items into your own clothes to dry from your body heat. It's not perfect, but it helps. A little. The smoky scent of the fire seeps into everything, but you'll take it over the sharp, raw cold any day. You think of stories passed down, of washerwomen who lost fingers to frostbite, or of men who tried to help and gave up after a single morning. The work is punishing, and yet you endure because you must. There's a grim pride in that, a sense that if you can survive winter's laundry, you can survive anything. A neighbour stops by with a mug of weak ale, sharing a quick joke and a commiserating smile. It's enough to warm your heart, if not your hands. For a few moments you talk about spring, about hopes for a better year, about the little joys that keep you going. Fresh bread, new lambs, the first warm day when you can do laundry without fear. As the day drags on, the light begins to fade. You gather your half-dry, half-frozen laundry and make your way back up the path, limbs heavy and joints stiff. The walk home is the hardest part, the weight of the basket digging into your shoulder, the wind at your back biting through every layer. At home, you hang what you can near the fire, hoping the warmth will finish what the sun and wind could not. You rub your hands, marvelling at how red and swollen they are, flexing your fingers to keep the blood moving. You wonder how many more winters your body can endure this, how many more years until someone invents an easier way. Historians still argue whether the shared hardship of winter laundry brought communities closer, or simply wore people down until they had nothing left to give. You suspect it's both. There's solidarity in suffering, but also a bone-deep exhaustion that seeps into everything. Some nights you dream of warmth, of sunlight and gentle breezes, and wake to find your hands curled tight against the cold. The world outside the cottage is silent, muffled by snow and the hush of winter's breath. You look out at the dark, knowing that tomorrow or the next day you'll be back at the river, fighting the same battle. But for tonight, you're grateful for the small victories. A few clean shirts, a moment of laughter, the promise of spring somewhere on the horizon. You settle by the fire, legs stretched out, the heat licking at your skin. It's not enough to erase the day's pain, but it soothes, just a little. The rhythm of your heartbeat slows, and for the first time all day, you allow yourself to relax. Laundry is still waiting, and winter will come again, but tonight you can rest, wrapped in the quiet triumph of survival. Your mind drifts, imagining a world where winter doesn't mean suffering, where clean clothes come easily, and the river is always warm. It's a fantasy, maybe, but it helps. And as you drift towards sleep, the fires glow, painting shadows on the walls. You remember the unspoken promise of every washerwoman before you, that no matter how cold, how hard, or how endless the work may seem, you'll endure. The winter cannot last forever, and in the end, the river will run warm again. Winter gives way finally to the slushy, uncertain thaw of early spring. The ground is soft and treacherous underfoot, puddles forming in every hollow and sending cold water up through your shoes. Yet for all the new discomforts, the mud, the unpredictable rain, the relentless damp, there's a collective sigh of relief as the threat of frostbite recedes. Still, a new set of anxieties creeps in with the warming days. What dangers are lurking in the water? What illnesses might be waiting in the folds of your family's clothing? What misfortunes might sneak in along with the grime you're so desperate to beat back? You bundle your laundry and walk to the river, breathing in the fresh, earthy scent that comes after a rain. It's a relief to be out from under the crushing cold, but today your mind is troubled. Rumours have trickled through the village about outbreaks, coughs that won't leave, fevers that spread, children who fall sick and never recover. Some blame the water, others the food, and a few cast nervous glances at the dirty heaps of clothing, wondering if filth itself is to blame. You remember stories the elders used to tell, how in bad years whole families could be swept away by sickness, leaving their homes shuttered and silent. The village priest speaks of bad air and curses, while the healer talks about invisible seeds of sickness, carried on the wind or clinging to the damp cloth. Everyone agrees that filth brings trouble, but no one is quite sure what to do about it, other than scrub harder, rinse longer, and pray. You kneel at the riverbank and set to work. The water is high, rushing with melted snow and colder than you expected. The mud is thicker now, sticking to your boots and seeping up your skirts, and every time you dip a garment into the water it comes up heavy and slow. You glance at your hands, raw and pale from endless washing, and wonder what invisible threats might be clinging to your skin. There's a neighbour nearby, a young mother, who looks nervous as she lays out her washing. Her baby's been coughing for days, and she worries aloud that the river's not clean enough, that the laundry might be making things worse. She asks if you've ever heard of such a thing. Illness passed from cloth to skin, from river to home. You shrug, recalling stories of children who grew sick after playing near the water, or men who died after working in wet clothes too long. Historians still argue whether medieval laundry practices did more to prevent disease or to spread it. Some claim that washing, even in dirty water, at least kept the worst grime at bay. Others argue that the crowded riverbanks and communal soap could easily become breeding grounds for every sickness in the village. You don't have the answers, no one does, but you can't shake the feeling that your battle against dirt is also a battle against something you can't see. As you work, you remember the healer's advice: boil the worst stained linens if you can, and hang everything in the sun until it's bone dry. Sunlight, she claims, is the best medicine, and there's a kind of hope in the idea. You set your washed clothes out on the bushes, praying for a break in the clouds and a little warmth to chase away whatever might be lurking in the fabric. The other washerfolk are full of stories about the time the village lost half its children to fever, about the strange boils that sometimes appear on the skin after a wash, about the priest who insists that only holy water can keep sickness at bay. You listen, trying to remember every remedy and every warning. Some women add handfuls of lavender or rosemary to the rinse water, hoping to drive away not just bad smells but bad spirits. Others simply scrub harder, working until their hands bleed. One woman swears by changing out the wash water often, never letting it sit too long, lest it grow things. You take her advice, though it means more work, hauling fresh buckets from the spring, dumping the old water far from where the children play. Still, you know it's not foolproof. The river itself is a mystery, sometimes running clear, sometimes thick with mud and silt and the odd dead fish. You wonder if it's possible to ever truly get something clean. There's a fringe theory whispered among the older women that sickness clings not just to dirt, but to memories, to old sorrows and grievances. They say that washing away a stain can sometimes bring back the pain that caused it, and that the only true way to cleanse something is to forgive and forget. You're not sure you believe it, but you've noticed that the angriest arguments always seem to flare up on laundry day, and that the river sometimes seems to carry those bitter words away, leaving everyone just a little lighter afterward. You take more care with the children's clothes, scrubbing each one twice and rinsing until your arms ache. You lay them out in the sunniest spot you can find, turning them often and watching for signs of dampness. Every so often, you glance over at the young mother who is quietly praying as she hangs her linens. You find yourself whispering your own hopes under your breath, that the river will run clean, that the sun will shine, that the sickness will pass your family by. The dangers of contaminated clothing aren't limited to sickness. There are other threats too, lice and fleas, which seem to thrive in dirty corners and unwashed seams. You remember the misery of an infestation, the endless scratching, the sour smell of vinegar poured over your scalp in a desperate attempt to drive the bugs away. Everyone has their own remedy. Some swear by strong soap, others by combing and picking, and a few by burning the worst infested garments. It's a constant losing battle, but you fight it all the same. Sometimes you hear stories from the next village about a new illness sweeping through, and the talk turns anxious. Did someone bring it back in their clothes, carried from town to town on a hem or a sleeve? The merchant who travels between markets is eyed with suspicion, his bundles of fine cloth treated with caution. The healer warns against borrowing clothes no matter how clean they look. You nod and keep your family's things separate just in case. Yet for all the fear, there's also comfort in the familiar ritual of laundry. The work is hard, the risks real, but there's a kind of order to it, a sense that if you just scrub hard enough, rinse long enough and dry well enough, you can keep the worst at bay. It's not true, of course, but it helps. The river flows on, indifferent, carrying away the dirt, the soap and the unspoken fears of the village. There's a superstition among some washerwomen that if you see your reflection in the water while rinsing clothes, you'll fall ill before the next full moon. You catch yourself avoiding the surface, eyes down, focused on the fabric in your hands. You laugh at yourself, but not too loudly. No need to tempt fate. There are enough real dangers in the world without inventing new ones. By the end of the day, your arms are shaking with fatigue. You gather your laundry, now clean as you can make it, and start the walk home. The sun is setting, casting long shadows across the fields, and you think about the invisible threats you've tried to wash away. You pass the healer's cottage and see her stirring a pot over the fire, mixing herbs and muttering prayers. You wonder what she knows that you don't, what secrets are hidden in her brews. At home, you lay out the clothes to finish drying by the hearth, careful to keep the children away until you're sure every scrap is warm and safe. You check for bites and rashes, for signs of trouble, and tuck everyone into bed with a whispered blessing. You collapse onto your own mattress, exhausted, and stare up at the rafters, wondering if you've done enough. Historians still debate whether medieval laundry was a help or a hindrance when it came to public health. Some say it was better than nothing, others claim it just moved the dirt around. You decide it doesn't matter. What counts is the effort, the care, the stubborn hope that tomorrow will be cleaner, safer, better. You drift off to sleep, fingers curled tight, the scent of soap and river water still clinging to your skin. You dream of clear streams, of sunlit fields, of a world where laundry is just a task, not a battle. But you know, deep down, that the dangers are real, and that every day you fight them, one shirt, one sheet, one careful rinse at a time. Morning will come again, and with it the same fears and the same hopes. The river will be waiting, the laundry piled high, the risks lurking in every fold. But for now, you rest, grateful for a night free of fever, for the warmth of a fire, and for the simple peace that comes from knowing you've done all you can. You wake to a rare patch of sunshine filtering through the wooden slats of your cottage. Today's load is lighter, just a few shirts, a couple of kerchiefs, and most precious of all, 2 fine linen undergarments you inherited from your mother. Linen, unlike the thick wool of everyday tunics, is cool in summer and gentle on the skin. It's a treasure, even more so because you know how fragile it is. In the medieval world, owning linen is a mark of status, and washing it is nothing short of an ordeal. You bundle up your laundry with unusual care, wrapping the linen in a soft cloth before placing it atop the coarser fabrics. Every step down the lane, you're aware of the risk. A trip or a stumble, a sudden rain shower, a stray dog, and your most valuable possessions could be ruined. By the time you reach the river, you've checked the bundle 3 times, and your heart is pounding for reasons you'd never admit out loud. On the riverbank, the other washerwomen notice immediately. Someone raises an eyebrow. Another gives you a little nod of respect, as if to say, "I see what you're carrying." The unspoken rules are different for linen. No soap shared, no jostling for stones, no distractions allowed. You find a clean patch of pebbles away from the main crowd and set to work, fingers trembling with the effort to be gentle. Linen is a luxury in this time and place, and every woman knows it. Most can only dream of owning a linen shift or cap, let alone several. Historians still argue whether the average medieval household even saw real linen from one year to the next, or if it remained the exclusive property of the wealthiest townsfolk and lords. You've heard both sides and know that in your village, linen is rare enough to be counted piece by piece, with each one representing months, sometimes years, of careful saving, trading, or inheritance. There's a reason linen is so coveted. It's lighter than wool, easier on the skin, and, when properly cared for, shines with a soft, almost luminous glow. But its delicacy is its curse. The wrong soap can eat holes right through it. A single careless twist can stretch the weave until it's misshapen. Linen must be soaked, never boiled, gently pressed, never beaten, dried flat, not hung where it might pull or warp. You begin by soaking the linen in clean water, never river water if you can help it, not with the mud and silt swirling through the current. Some days, you haul water up from the spring, clear and cold, just for this purpose. You knead the fabric between your palms, murmuring a little prayer that no unseen stain will surface, no tiny moth hole appear. The soap you use today is a precious lump, softer and creamier than the gritty stuff reserved for woolens and work shirts. Made from rendered fat and a secret handful of herbs, it was a gift from an old aunt on your wedding day. You use just a scrap, working up the lightest lather, and dab gently at each spot. For a particularly stubborn mark, Perhaps a drop of last week's wine or a smudge of soot. You reach for chalk, another rare commodity. You rub it in circles and wait, watching for the stain to fade as if by magic. Nearby, a neighbour is struggling with her own piece of linen, cursing under her breath as the delicate cloth begins to fray at the hem. She catches your eye, and you both share a look of commiseration. There's no heartbreak quite like ruining linen. "The saints watch over our washing," she sighs, and you nod, half believing it's true. Some women go even further, wrapping their linen garments in muslin or old cheesecloth before washing, an extra layer of protection. Others swear by rinsing with rainwater, which is softer and less likely to leave behind the mineral traces that can yellow even the brightest white. There's an art to linen care, passed down through whispered advice and hard-won mistakes. You remember the stories told by the old nurse, how in great houses linen is the mark of wealth. Noble women sleep in linen sheets and swaddle their infants in embroidered linen wraps. Some have an entire chest devoted to fine shifts, trimmed in a lace and carefully inventoried by the mistress herself. To lose a piece to a careless wash is to risk disgrace, or worse, a mark against the housekeeper's reputation that can last for years. In your world, the stakes are different, but just as high. You check and recheck every seam, your heart in your mouth as you lift the linen from the water. A tiny tear could mean weeks of mending, a ruined hem a whole day spent picking out threads and starting over. You set the pieces to dry on a clean board, never in direct sun, never where the wind might whip them away. There's a certain pride in how you handle your linen. You think of your mother, her voice soft as she showed you the difference between gentle pressure and careless wringing, between proper soap and what's used for the rags. You remember the way she'd smooth the fabric over her knees, eyes scanning for flaws, and how she'd murmur, "A woman's worth is in the care she takes with what she owns." Maybe that's old-fashioned, or maybe it's the only way to survive. As you work, you overhear a story about a neighbour whose new linen shirt was ruined when her husband tried to help with the laundry, used the wrong soap, beat it against a rock, and left it drying in the full sun until it was yellowed and stiff. The shirt, once a thing of beauty, now hangs limp and faded, a lesson in the dangers of misplaced enthusiasm. You stifle a laugh and make a mental note to do all the linen washing yourself, no matter how tired you are. Historians still argue whether linen was truly a status symbol or simply a practical necessity that happened to become rare. Some say it's both, essential for the skin and spirit, but only if you can afford it. In some towns, linen was so valuable that it was included in wills, passed down as inheritance along with land and livestock. It's not just a piece of fabric, it's a testament to years of hard work and careful stewardship. Drying linen is its own ordeal. You search for a patch of shade away from dust and birds and spread the pieces flat on grass or clean stones. You watch anxiously, hoping a sudden gust of wind won't send your precious shift tumbling into the mud. You sit nearby, fanning away insects and turning the cloth every so often to ensure an even dry. The hours slip by, and you use the time to mend socks, braid your hair, or swap stories with the other women, always keeping one eye on your treasure. It's not just about appearance either. Clean linen is healthier, less likely to chafe or cause sores. In summer, a linen shift is a blessing. In winter, it's layered under wool, adding warmth without bulk. You know women who have worn the same linen for decades, patching and repatching until there's more thread than original cloth. Each patch tells a story of thrift, of necessity, of a life lived close to the bone. As the day fades, you gather your linen with the utmost care, folding each piece along the seams your mother taught you. Back home, you lay it in the chest at the foot of your bed, nestled between sprigs of dried lavender to keep away moths. You smooth your hands over the fabric, feeling its coolness and thinking of the women who came before you. Mothers, grandmothers, all of them tied to this same cycle of labour and care. You think of the stories you'll tell your own children someday about the value of what's hard to keep and harder to replace. Linen, you realise, is more than a symbol. It's a link to the past, a promise to the future, and testament to your own perseverance. Tonight, as you slip into your only linen shift, you feel a flicker of comfort, a sense that, despite everything, you've managed to preserve something precious. Clean linen, after all, is not just a luxury, it's a victory. You rest, knowing tomorrow will bring another battle with dirt, another lesson in patience and care. But for tonight, you savour the softness against your skin, the coolness that promises a few hours of comfort, and the pride that comes from knowing that, in a world where nothing is easy, you have managed to keep something bright. There's no such thing as a typical laundry day, but some days seem made to test your patience more than others. Today, the sun is already high and hot as you trudge to the river, carrying not just the usual mound of stained woolens and grimy tunics, but a new challenge. A pair of children's breeches with what can only be described as a disaster splattered across the knees, and a tablecloth dotted with mysterious stains in every shade from wine purple to sap green. Every medieval washerwoman has her own bag of tricks for stains. You grew up listening to women swap strange advice at the riverbank, some of it handed down from grandmothers you never met. Some stains yield to hard scrubbing or a bit of soap and lye, but the worst ones require a whole arsenal of home remedies and, if you're honest, a willingness to experiment with the ridiculous. It's a battlefield out here, but you're armed and ready. The first stain of the day is a big one, a thick, dark smear on the back of your husband's shirt. You poke it, sniff it, unwise, as always, and try to remember what caused it. Was it pitch from fixing the roof, or maybe the remnants of last week's supper? No matter. You start with the basics, lathering it up with your rough soap, but the stain barely budges. This is where things get creative. You remember one neighbour's favourite stale urine stored in a clay pot and poured over tough stains before washing. The ammonia does work, but the smell is something else entirely. You grit your teeth and use just a little, scrubbing the spot and trying not to breathe too deeply. It helps though. Not a miracle, but the mark begins to fade. There's a quiet satisfaction in seeing even a little progress, and you remind yourself that laundry is always about patience more than perfection. A child nearby shrieks with laughter as her mother chases her, wielding a chicken feather. Another tip: dusting feathers over fresh berry stains is supposed to lift the worst of the juice, though you've never had much luck with it yourself. Still, you're willing to try anything once. For grass stains, you've heard boiling the garment with wild sorrel, or rubbing with a handful of green walnuts can help. Sap from certain plants is rumoured to cut through grease, while ashes from last night's fire, when mixed with water, make a paste that draws out stubborn marks. The tablecloth is another story. There's a blotch that looks suspiciously like blood, and you wince at the memory. Someone must have cut their finger during supper. Old Marta swears by rinsing with cold water first, then rubbing with a stone dipped in vinegar. It stings your own cracked fingers, but the mark does seem to lighten after a few minutes. You set the cloth aside to dry, knowing you'll need to return to it later for a second attack. A woman next to you offers a handful of boiled bones, another old method for polishing up white linen. You watch as she scrapes them gently over her best cap, humming under her breath. It seems to work, and you tuck the tip away for another day. You'd be surprised what you can use for laundry, she says with a wink. If it doesn't eat the cloth, it might just eat the stain. The two of you laugh, grateful for any victory, however small. Then there's the mysterious stain on your son's breeches. A sticky, dark spot you suspect came from some wild fruit, or perhaps an unfortunate encounter with tar. This one's a real puzzle. Historians still argue whether medieval stain remedies were true science or mostly superstition, but you know that most women are half alchemist, half magician by necessity. You decide to try a fringe method you heard from a passing peddler. Rub a handful of clay into the stain, let it dry in the sun, then brush it off before washing as usual. The result isn't perfect, but the worst of the mark fades, and you count it as a win. Some stains, of course, are impossible to shift. The best you can do is fade them until they blend in with the fabric, then patch over the worst. Patching itself is a skill, and you've become adept at cutting and sewing scraps of old cloth to hide damage. There's no shame in a well-mended shirt. In fact, in your village, The neatness of a patch is a mark of pride, a sign that a woman knows how to care for her family with what little she has. There are stories at the Riverbank, stories of a woman who once tried scrubbing a stain with powdered eggshell, another who used her husband's spit as a remedy for ink marks, and one legendary washer who swore by dipping garments in the dew at dawn for the freshest finish. You've seen almost every technique, from scraping with bits of shell to beating stains with the flat of a wooden spoon. Every washerwoman has her secret, a preferred spot on the riverbank, a particular brand of soap, or a lucky stone. You find comfort in the routine, in the way your hands know just how much pressure to use, how long to soak, and when to give up and let a stain be. The social aspect of stain removal can't be ignored. Some days, you feel as much a counsellor as a cleaner, as neighbours gather around to debate the best ways to tackle a stubborn mark. There's an unspoken competition, a need to prove you're resourceful and capable. No one wants to be the woman whose family walks to church in stained tunics. You watch as a friend tries to bleach a yellowed sleeve with sun and salt, laying the garment out flat and dusting it with a fine layer of white crystals. The sun does its slow work, and by midday, the fabric is a shade brighter. It's not perfect, but it's progress, and you cheer her on, knowing that in this world, progress is worth celebrating. Once, in a fit of desperation, you boiled a stained cloth with the ashes of dried nettles, hoping the sharp scent and the gritty powder would banish a persistent patch of grime. It half worked, and you chalked up the results to experience. Another time, you tried soaking a blood-stained rag in cold milk, a remedy said to work wonders but which only left the linen smelling sour for days. You've even heard tales of magical cures, charms whispered over the water, special herbs gathered at midnight, prayers said for particularly stubborn stains. Some scoff at the idea, others swear by it. You're willing to try anything once, except maybe the one about burying a stained shirt at the crossroads for a week to confuse the evil spirits. That, you decide, is a step too far. By afternoon, the worst stains are gone, and you're left with a pile of damp, mostly clean laundry. You lay the shirts out on the grass, careful to keep them flat so the sun can do its work. Some women lay stones on the corners to keep the wind from snatching them away. Others thread thin branches through the sleeves and hems for extra stability. The day's work isn't finished yet. There are still buttons to sew back on, holes to patch, and hems to mend. You settle onto a flat rock with your needle and thread, hands moving with the practiced speed of someone who's done this more times than she can count. You share gossip and laughter with the other women, trading stories about whose husband is the hardest on his shirts and whose children bring home the worst stains. Historians still debate whether all these quirky remedies really worked, or were simply the best that could be managed in a time without commercial detergents or chemical cleaners. You suspect it's a little of both. Some stains are eternal, others are best left as reminders of a life well lived. Berry juice from a summer picnic, grass from a hard-won game, wine from a rare feast. As the sun drops low, you pack up your clean mended clothes, rolling them carefully to avoid new wrinkles. You look at your hands, red and rough, marked with soap and sun but capable and steady. You're tired but satisfied, knowing you've done your best with what you had. At home you stack the folded clothes on a shelf, admiring the way even the patched and faded shirts look almost new. The stains you couldn't remove are smaller, lighter, less important now. You've done what you could, and in this world that's all anyone can ask. You sit by the fire, feet up, and think about the curious mixture of knowledge and luck that is medieval laundry. Some days you feel like a chemist, others a magician, always an optimist. Tomorrow will bring new stains, new stories, and new remedies to try. And as you drift off to sleep, the day's laughter and lessons echoing in your mind, you promise yourself that no stain, however stubborn, will ever defeat you. Not as long as you have soap, sunlight, and a river at your side. You can always tell when a shadow of fear is drifting through the village. The usual chattering and banter at the riverbank fades, replaced by anxious glances and hurried movements. The air seems tighter, every task heavier. Today, You feel it more than ever. A traveller came through just yesterday, bringing tales from a distant city. A strange fever, a plague that sweeps through streets and leaves households empty. It isn't the first time you've heard such stories, but this one comes with specifics. Red spots, sudden chills, neighbours falling ill overnight. You clutch your bundle of washing with new unease, your hands sweaty despite the cool morning. The laundry feels different, heavier, somehow more dangerous. You remember your mother's old warnings. Dirty clothes bring sickness and sickness brings ruin. And you wonder, for perhaps the first time, if she was right. Historians still argue about the connection between hygiene and plague in the Middle Ages, whether dirty clothing truly attracted illness, or if people simply noticed the association in hindsight, trying to make sense of something they couldn't see or control. At the river, the others are already whispering. Someone claims they heard a family on the edge of town has shut themselves indoors, afraid to touch their neighbours or even hang out their laundry. Another woman shares the story of a man who burned all his clothes and bedding when the first spots appeared, desperate to protect his children from the creeping fear. You set to work with trembling fingers. Today, every garment feels like a potential threat. Your own son was sick last winter, and you remember the way you boiled every cloth, every rag, in a fever of panic, the scent of soap thick in the air. Even now, the memory of that fear lingers, the feeling of not knowing what to fight, only that you must do something. You watch as a neighbour, usually so carefree, kneels down and scrubs with an energy bordering on violence. She mutters prayers under her breath, pausing to cross herself before dunking each piece into the river. "The fleas," she whispers to anyone who'll listen. "They say it's the fleas in the rags, jumping from cloth to skin and back again." No one laughs at her, not today. Everyone's heard the stories. A few women have taken to boiling their laundry, lugging heavy pots to the fire and letting shirts and sheets bubble until the air is thick with steam. It's not easy. Wood is precious, water must be hauled, and more than one pot has been ruined by a careless moment. Still, the effort seems worth it. You join in, boiling what you can, wincing as the heat sears your hands and the steam reddens your face. Boiling helps, but it's no guarantee. The healer passes by and offers a bitter-smelling bundle of herbs to steep in your rinse water. To drive out the evil, she says. You accept, even though you're not sure you believe. Desperate times call for desperate measures. You see a few others hang their washing higher than usual, careful to keep everything out of the dust and mud, hoping to keep the unseen dangers at bay. You remember the times you saw the washerwomen in the city, faces masked with cloth, hands gloved in old rags, tending to piles of bedding carried out from the houses of the sick. Sometimes they wore sprigs of rosemary pinned to their shifts, or even little bundles of garlic, hoping to ward off whatever spirits or poisons might be lurking in the cloth. You never thought it would come to your quiet corner of the world. The fear of laundry itself becomes a new superstition. Some say you mustn't bring your basket in through the front door. Bad luck will follow. Others insist that only men should handle the wash during a plague, to spare the women and children. Of course, that rarely happens. The women are always at the river, even when the men hide in the fields or shut themselves up in the barns. You share a knowing glance with your neighbour. If it were left to them, we'd all be buried in filth by Michaelmas. A kind of ritual develops. Shake each garment vigorously before washing, as if you might dislodge a lurking danger. Scrub the seams twice and always finish with a prayer. You try not to let your mind wander to what could be clinging to the hems and cuffs, the lice, the fleas, the invisible seeds of illness. You focus instead on the rhythm of the work. Soak, lather, rinse, wring, repeat. Sometimes the effort is too much. You see a woman set aside a bundle of bedding that belonged to her daughter, now lost to fever. She cannot bear to wash it, cannot bear to burn it. It sits at the edge of the riverbank, a monument to her grief. There are no words, only silence. By midday, the sun is high and the air feels heavy. The laundry dries more slowly, weighed down by worry. You move from one task to another, never pausing, afraid to let your mind rest. When you finally sit to eat, the conversation is hushed. Someone mentions a neighbouring village where the sickness took half the children in a week. Another talks about a priest who walked the lanes ringing a bell, warning families to stay inside to burn what could not be cleaned. Historians still debate whether these rituals and routines made any difference. Did boiling the sheet save lives? Did herbs in the rinse water drive away disease? Or simply soothe anxious minds? Some say that in times of plague, even hope can be a kind of medicine, something to hold on to when reason fails. By afternoon you're exhausted, your arms ache, your back throbs, and every garment feels heavier than before. Still, you press on, unwilling to leave even a single shirt unwashed. The village feels changed, smaller and more silent. The children play close to their mothers, no longer running wild along the riverbank. Even the animals seem subdued. As you wring out the last of the laundry, you notice a flea hop from the folds of a sleeve to your wrist. Panic flares. You flick it off and douse your hands in the rinse water, then rub them dry on the grass, heart pounding. You recall the healer's words. It's the fleas that carry death. Keep them off, and you'll be safe. But nothing feels safe anymore. On your way home, you see the village divided. Some are burning old straw mattresses and worn-out clothes in smoky bonfires, filling the air with the acrid scent of fear and desperation. Others stand by, arms crossed, unwilling to part with anything that might still be useful. Arguments break out, over firewood, over buckets, over whether to trust the new remedies or cling to old ways. You reach your cottage and hang the laundry as far from the ground as you can, tying extra knots in the lines, tucking sachets of dried lavender and wormwood among the sheets. You close the shutters tight and light a small bundle of herbs, letting the smoke curl through the room, willing it to chase away whatever might be lurking in the corners. That night you struggle to sleep. The usual aches in your hands and arms are nothing compared to the unease in your heart. You think of your children, of your neighbours, of all the stories you've heard about sickness creeping in through a crack in the door, a patch of dirt, a careless touch. The world feels smaller, more fragile, and you wonder how many more days will pass before the fear lifts, before laughter returns to the riverbank. Yet even now you see signs of hope. A neighbour leaves a bundle of fresh bread on your doorstep, a silent message that you're not alone. In the morning, you hear a song rising over the sound of the river, soft at first, then stronger as more voices join in. The work continues, as it must, and the rhythm of laundry day becomes its own reassurance, a promise that life can still go on, even in the shadow of plague. Historians still argue about how people coped during these dark times, whether rituals and routines made life bearable, or simply gave people something to do while they waited for the danger to pass. You decide it doesn't matter. The act of scrubbing, of boiling, of hanging sheets in the sun, these are all ways of fighting back, of claiming a little piece of control in a world that feels uncontrollable. By the end of the week you realise that the stains of fear will linger long after the worst has passed. Yet you also know that the same sun that dried your laundry today will rise again tomorrow, and that somehow you will face whatever comes. In the end, you trust your own hands, the work they do, the care they show, the stubborn hope they carry with every clean shirt and mended sheet. You drift off to sleep that night with the scent of herbs in the air, the sound of the river in your dreams, and a quiet determination that you will keep fighting, one wash at a time. There are days when the riverbank feels more like a village square than a place of toil. A theatre of murmured gossip, sharp glances and laughter echoing off the water. If you listen closely as you scrub, you'll hear the real business of the village being conducted not at the marketplace or church, but here, with bare feet in the mud and soap in hand. Washing clothes in public is never just about cleanliness. It's about reputation, rumour, and the delicate dance of being known and not too well known. Today the air is filled with the hum of many voices. The first warm breeze of spring has arrived, and with it, the desire for talk. You find your usual patch of ground by the river and settle in, ears already catching scraps of conversation drifting from both directions. The old women cluster together, exchanging pointed looks as they whisper about who's been seen leaving the baker's at dawn, or who's been spotted walking too often past the blacksmith's window. Your friend Marta is the first to sidle up, a basket on her hip and a sly smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "Did you hear about Elsa's son?" she says, not waiting for an answer. "Back from the city with a pouch full of silver, but his boots are muddier than a pig's wallow. I wonder where he's really been." You arch an eyebrow, scrubbing a shirt with renewed energy as you wait for the next revelation. Gossip is the currency of the Riverbank. It's traded more freely than bread, sometimes more jealously guarded than gold. You know the rules. Never let slip too much about yourself. Always act surprised by bad news, and never, ever admit if the latest story is about you. You offer your own tidbit, a harmless tale about the miller's daughter and the time she tripped over a goat and landed in the dye vat. Laughter bubbles up, tension easing as the women add their own embellishments. The story will grow by evening, passed along until the goat is a wolf and the dye vat is a well. For all the laughter, there's a seriousness to these exchanges. One whispered word about a neighbour's laundry, too many stains, too few patches, the wrong kind of soap, can set tongues wagging for weeks. A dress washed too rarely or too often can be cause for suspicion. Is she lazy? Is she hiding something? You feel the eyes on your own work and take care to fold each garment neatly, to scrub each stain with extra attention. Children play at the edge of the water, occasionally snatching at the drying laundry and earning a sharp rebuke. Even the children are not immune to the Riverbank's gossip. You hear two girls giggling about who they hope to sit with at church, and a boy boasting that his father is the strongest in the village, though you know for a fact he can barely lift a full bucket. A heated discussion breaks out between two women over the best way to mend a torn hem. One swears by fine stitches and patience, the other by a quick patch and a sturdy knot. The debate escalates, drawing in nearby listeners. You smile, watching as the group divides into factions, each defending their chosen method with mock indignation. Historians still argue whether these Riverbank debates actually improved anyone's sewing or just fueled the fires of village rivalry. Of course, not all the talk is light. There are stories of hardship, whispered confessions about a missing chicken or a neighbour's empty larder. Someone mentions a family struggling to pay the tanner for new soles on their shoes, another tells of a cousin sent to work in a far-off town. You share in these stories too, nodding, offering a kind word or a promise of spare bread if it's needed. The Riverbank is a lifeline as much as a battleground, a place where help is quietly offered and pride just as quietly protected. Today, a new rumour sweeps through the washerwomen like wind through wheat. The Lord Steward is looking for a new maid, and someone's cousin's sister has already been spotted practicing her curtsy. You watch as faces light up, ambitions flaring behind careful eyes. A job at the manor means regular meals, decent pay, and maybe a chance to send money home. It also means your every move will be watched, your hands forever chapped from scrubbing the master's sheets. The Riverbank bursts into speculation. Who will get the post? What secrets they'll learn? What old feuds might finally be put to rest? Not all reputations are made or ruined in a day. Some are slow to change, weathered by years of careful management and hard work. There's an older woman, Agnes, who's washed clothes at this river for longer than anyone can remember. Her word carries weight. She can make or break a newcomer's standing with a single nod. You remember how she once defended you from gossip when you first arrived, telling the others you had a washerwoman's hands and a lion's heart. You make sure to stay on her good side, offering her the best soap and a spot near the cleanest water. There are, of course, the moments of pettiness. Two sisters squabble over a drying line, voices rising until their mother intervenes. Another woman mutters about how her neighbour's laundry smells of old fish, pointedly turning her own sheet so the wind carries it away from the offending pile. Such slights are never forgotten. They'll come up again the next time someone needs to borrow a bar of soap or a pinch of salt. Still, the Riverbank is where alliances are forged. You see two girls, once enemies, now sharing a spot and trading stories as they beat the dirt from their father's shirts. Bonds are formed over the shared rhythm of scrubbing, the mutual complaints about aching backs and ungrateful children. There's a sense that, for all the rivalries, everyone here is in the same boat, struggling to keep their heads above the water, both literally and figuratively. Historians still debate whether these daily gatherings did more to foster unity or division. Some claim the Riverbank was the original court of public opinion, a place where the village's real politics played out, far from the eyes of lords and priests. Others suggest that, for all the talk, little ever really changed. Families stuck to their own, old grudges lingered, and new arrivals found themselves on the outside looking in. You know it's a little of both. The Riverbank is a mirror for the village, its strengths, its weaknesses, its hopes, and its fears. Here, news travels fast and judgments faster. But so does help. If someone falls sick, there are always extra hands to carry their laundry. If a child is lost, everyone joins the search. In times of crisis, even the sharpest tongues soften. As the sun climbs higher, you finish your washing and wring out each piece, arms trembling from the effort. Around you, the conversation ebbs and flows, a tapestry of voices and stories that holds the village together as surely as the roads and the fields. You know that when you leave the riverbank, your day's work will be judged, not just for cleanliness, but for what it says about you and your family. You gather your things and say your goodbyes, pausing to offer a word of encouragement to the youngest girls just starting their apprenticeship in the world of laundry and gossip. You remind them that a kind word goes further than a sharp one, that reputation is built over years but lost in a moment. Back home, you hang your clean clothes to dry and settle in by the hearth, reflecting on the day's stories. You know that tomorrow will bring new rumours, new alliances and new challenges. But you're grateful for the riverbank, a place of work, of talk, of laughter and sometimes of healing. As dusk falls, you think about all the secrets held in the folds of every shirt and shift, the silent witness of the river to every hope, fear and ambition. You smile to yourself, knowing that whatever else happens, the riverbank will always be there, a stage for the never-ending play of village life. The world of laundry is woven with its own quiet justice, a hierarchy not only of soap and stains, but of duties, punishments, and second chances. Today, as you lug your wash basket to the river, you sense a different kind of tension humming through the air. A new face sits awkwardly on the periphery, elbows perched on her knees, head bowed, clutching a bundle of soiled rags tighter than any prized linen. You know her, or rather, you know of her. Annette, the miller's daughter, caught last market day borrowing from the bakehouse till. Her sentence wasn't jail or stocks. It was laundry, weeks of it, done in full view of every watchful eye. It isn't unusual. In your village and so many others, laundry is more than work. It's a punishment, a way to humble, to correct, to remake a reputation by scrubbing away the evidence of shame. The riverbank is not only a place for cleaning clothes, but for cleaning slates. If you listen to the rhythm of the river, you can almost hear the stories of those sent here to serve out sentences. A boy who carved his initials into the Lord's door, a woman accused of gossiping too freely, a farmhand who drank too deeply from his master's wine barrel. You set your basket down with a sigh, easing into your usual spot, but your eyes are drawn to Annette. Her hands move with the stiff, uncertain rhythm of someone unused to the endless cycle of soak, lather, scrub, wring. Each time she tries to beat the worst of the mud from a shirt, she winces, a city girl's hands, red and swollen in the cold. She glances up, finds you watching, and quickly looks away. Harder work than stealing bread, murmurs Marta beside you, not unkindly. But maybe she'll learn. The others nod, some with a hint of satisfaction, others with reluctant sympathy. Everyone remembers their first humiliation, their first real test under the unblinking gaze of the village. Here, at the river, punishment is public and personal. Washerwomen talk as much about justice as they do about soap. Historians still argue whether medieval punishments for small crimes were cruel or simply practical. The stocks and pillories were dramatic, but labour, especially labour that served the community, was the sentence most likely to reform and least likely to breed more resentment. The riverbank is as much a school as it is a scaffold. You see it in the way older women take the punished under their wing, showing them how to wring out water with aching arms, how to twist linen so it dries in half the time, how to patch a tear so fine no eye will see. Annette's struggle is, for the moment, a welcome distraction from your own aches. You remember your cousin, years ago, sent to the river as punishment for slander. She came home with hands cracked and bleeding, but also with 3 new friends and a basket of wild greens gifted by a washerwoman she'd once ignored. Punishment here is never just about suffering. It's about being brought low and maybe lifted again. Laundry as penance isn't only for theft or gossip. Sometimes it's a way for a family to make amends. If a child breaks a neighbour's window, you might see their mother at the river the next day, scrubbing twice as much as usual, her apology spelled out in suds and sweat. If 2 men quarrel, their wives might quietly exchange bundles of washing as a gesture of truce. There are whispered tales, fringe stories that never make it to the ears of the priest, about ritual laundry. A girl sent to the river at dawn to wash the blood from her own knuckles. The stains a reminder of a fight she's vowed never to repeat. A widow laundering the wedding linens of a woman she once called a rival, marking the end of a grudge older than her marriage. These acts are penance and healing, punishment and peace. You watch Annette work, her movements growing more sure as the morning passes. At first, no one helps her. She is meant to struggle, to feel the weight of her wrongdoing. But by midday, as her hands shake and her face crumples in frustration, someone quietly swaps her gritty soap for a better bar. Another nudges her basket closer to the sun's warmth. Small mercies are allowed, but never until the lesson is half learned. Children gather at the edge of the river, watching Annette with wide, curious eyes. You know that this too is part of the punishment. Being seen, being remembered, being told in whispers as a warning and a lesson. Don't end up like her, the children's mothers say, but you notice that by afternoon some of the same children are fetching water for her, running errands, even giggling when she splashes them accidentally with suds. The washwomen keep a running commentary, sometimes cruel, sometimes gentle, sometimes just a distraction from their own labour. They debate her chances. Will she quit? Will she come back tomorrow? And trade stories about past penitence. There's pride in those who finish their sentences well, who show up every day and leave a little less ashamed, a little more skilled. Laundry, after all, is a great leveller. Everyone gets dirty, everyone needs clean clothes, and everyone suffers under the same sun and the same sharp stones. By midday, you find yourself chatting with Annette as you work side by side, giving her tips for lifting stains and saving sore wrists. Her answers are shy at first, but soon she's laughing with you over the river's constant surprise. A frog in the rinse bucket, a sock stolen by a magpie. The punishment is hard but not without hope. By the week's end, Annette's hands are blistered but strong, her back straighter, her gaze less fearful. The village has watched her suffer, but also watched her endure. When she brings home her final basket, spotless and neatly folded, even the miller's wife nods in grudging respect. There are other forms of laundry penance. If someone is caught lying, they might be tasked with scrubbing the filthiest blankets in the parish, or bleaching the surplices for Sunday service, a nerve-wracking assignment, as the priest is notoriously picky. If the church bell ringer oversleeps, he spends his afternoon at the river, washing the altar cloths and grumbling under his breath. Each offence earns its own cycle of humiliation, and, if done well, redemption. You take a kind of pride in the Riverbank's rough justice. There is, for all its harshness, a sense of fairness, of second chances given if not always deserved. Even the children learn that mistakes are inevitable, but amends must be made. There's a rhythm to it. A wrong, a punishment, a chance to start anew. As the sun dips lower, Annette lingers, folding her last shirt, eyes brighter than when the day began. She thanks you quietly, and you squeeze her arm, remembering your own first lesson at the riverbank and the women who made space for you. Tomorrow she will come back, not as a penitent, but as a neighbour. As you carry your own basket home, arms aching but spirit lighter, you think about all the stories written in soap and water, all the slates wiped clean by patience and sweat. The river keeps no record of wrongs, only the memory of hands that worked until the stain was gone. You arrive home, hang your washing to dry and watch the last rays of sun dance across the clean linen. In the silence, you remember the laughter and the tears at the river, the stories of forgiveness, and the slow, stubborn hope of redemption. Laundry as punishment is never easy, but as you settle by the fire, listening to the quiet, you know that some stains do fade, and some wounds, scrubbed enough, do heal. At the heart of the village, woven between the rumours, the mud, and the sharp slap of linen on stone, is the secret world of those who wash for the powerful, the king's laundress. Whenever you heard those words as a child, your imagination soared. You pictured marble tubs, rose water, golden combs, and women in velvet robes gently dabbing away the dust from jewelled gowns. The reality, of course, is nothing so grand. If anything, being the royal laundress is both a blessing and a brutal burden, a badge of trust and a sentence of endless toil. The gossip about the king's laundress travels faster than the morning mist. Today, the Riverbank is abuzz. Word has come from the castle that Lady Sybil, long the Queen's favourite laundress, has retired her post. Hands crippled from years of lye and cold water, there's a flurry of speculation about who will take her place. Marta, always one for drama, says she'd rather scrub the stable floors than be responsible for the king's underclothes. One spot missed, and it's off with your head, she whispers, wide-eyed, to giggles and shudders. You think of what it would be like, washing not just for your family but for a palace. There are tales, some true, some exaggerated, of laundresses rising from humble birth to coveted roles within the royal household. It's said the best laundresses are chosen for nimble fingers, keen eyes, and above all absolute discretion. After all, what a laundress sees, the blood, the tears, the traces of perfume or ink or passion, could change the fate of a court. Sometimes a stain tells a story no one dares repeat. If you became the king's laundress, you'd be up before dawn, walking the servants' halls with your head down, arms filled with silk and damask and the softest of linens. The work is endless. Not only the king's own garments, but those of the queen, the princes and princesses, the steward, the head cook, the visiting dignitaries, and every undergarment, sheet and tablecloth in between. One mistake, one burnt hem or faint shadow of a stain, and your position, your living, and perhaps your family's safety could be at risk. The castle washhouse is a world apart from the village riverbank, but in some ways, it's worse. The tubs are deeper, but the water is just as cold. The work is supervised, always, by a stern matron or an officious steward, eyes narrowed, tallying every item. You might have helpers, but you must also answer for them. If someone loses a sleeve or tears a shift, it's your reputation on the line. The soap is better, yes, a little smoother, a little more fragrant, but it's used in greater quantities and the royal washing demands perfection. Some days, you're given a bowl of rose water or a pinch of ground chalk to brighten a particularly delicate shift. For the king's own shirts, there are strict instructions: soak, dab, press, never wring. The smallest wrinkle or hint of sweat is unacceptable. Historians still argue whether the king's laundress was truly a position of honour or just another form of invisible, unending servitude. Certainly there are privileges, better food, warm rooms, sometimes even a small coin or a cast-off garment at the end of the season. In rare cases, a clever laundress might overhear something useful, a secret whispered between sheets, a rumour sewn into a torn cuff, and use it to her advantage, but for most it's simply more work, higher stakes, and more eyes watching every move. There's a story, half truth, half legend, about a laundress who found a hidden letter sewn into the lining of a nobleman's shirt. She could have sold the secret and lived like a queen. Instead, she returned it to its owner, earning a place in the Queen's good graces for a generation. Others weren't so lucky. A misplaced ribbon, a dropped stocking, and suddenly the wrath of a prince or princess is upon you. You wonder, as you scrub your own family's washing, whether it's better to be noticed by the powerful or to remain safely out of sight. The king's laundress is both, trusted and suspect, honoured and envied, always on the edge of a mistake. Every day is a test of endurance. Boiling, soaping, beating, rinsing, ironing. Yes, the royal sheets must be pressed, sometimes by heated stones, sometimes by the weight of heavy wooden rollers. Yet even in the castle, the basics don't change. The backaches are the same, the lie still bites, and the constant dampness gnaws at your joints. One wrong move and you're banished back to the village, your story told in whispers as a warning to others. She got too close to power. See how it turned out. But sometimes the role comes with unexpected power. A laundress with a gentle hand can win the favour of a queen. A clever one might learn which lords visit in secret, which ladies cry into their pillows, which banners are hurriedly washed on the eve of a rebellion. Historians still debate whether royal laundresses were truly privy to great secrets, or merely witnesses to the daily grind of court life. There's a kind of solidarity among the king's laundresses, a sisterhood built on sweat and shared secrets. In some courts, the head laundress is almost a matriarch, holding sway among the lower servants, dispensing advice and brokering peace between feuding maids. In others, competition is fierce, with every mistake pounced on, every favour jealously guarded. The village washerwomen joke that if you want to know the truth about a noble household, ask the laundress, not the cook or the stable boy. You imagine for a moment yourself in those halls, carrying the weight of silk and velvet, feeling the pressure to make each garment gleam. You think of the risk, the constant need for perfection, and you find yourself oddly grateful for your own muddy stretch of Riverbank, for the simple justice of your village where mistakes are forgiven with time, and stains, once faded, are left in peace. Of course, back at the Riverbank, the reality of royal laundry is far away, replaced by the urgent needs of daily life. The women joke about what they'd do with a gold coin from the king's purse, about which of them would last the longest under the queen's scrutiny. Someone swears that the royal laundress never has to wash her own hands, that she's given gloves of softest lambskin for her work. You all laugh, shaking your heads, knowing that the truth is likely far less glamorous. There are always stories of laundresses who rise, who save enough to start a market stall, who marry a steward or a cook and move into the warm heart of the castle. But for every success there's a warning, a woman who returned with her hands ruined, her spirit broken by impossible demands and the ever-watchful eyes of the court. As you finish your own work laying out the last of the day's washing to dry, you think about the invisible thread that ties all washerwomen together, from the humblest peasant to the queen's favourite. It's a bond forged in steam, in laughter, in shared aches and whispered secrets. Whether you wash for a king or for your own family, the work is never easy, never truly done, but always, somehow, yours. You gather your things and start the walk home, arms heavy but mind lighter for the stories shared. You catch a last bit of gossip from Marta. They say the new royal laundress is a local girl, someone's cousin. Imagine that. And you smile. In a world where everything changes and nothing does, the washerwoman's tale continues, bright and stubborn as a fresh-washed linen fluttering in the wind. At home, you hang your washing, thinking not of kings and queens, but of the simple satisfaction that comes from seeing your family's shirts clean and bright, the stains of yesterday washed away. You press your aching hands together, grateful for the warmth of your hearth, and promise yourself you'll never envy the royal laundress again. Not too much, anyway. The work of washing never stops, each day's grime, sweat and sorrow replaced by the next, as endless as the flow of the river itself. But for all the quiet heroics and small triumphs, there's a cost nobody talks about openly, a legacy of the riverbanks and washhouses, the harm done to the land itself. You've never thought much about where the dirt goes when you scrub it from your family's shirts, or what happens to the harsh soap and soapy water when it flows back into the stream. Yet as you get older, you start to notice the changes and the stories old women whisper after the work is done. Today, you're one of the first to the river, hoping to grab a patch of soft grass before the crowds arrive. The sun's barely up, but already the air is thick with the earthy sense of silt, damp stone, and something sharper, the tang of soap, ashes, and wood smoke. The patch you claim is one you've used for years, but the grass there never seems to grow back fully, no matter how you rest it between washes. The soil is packed hard as clay. You set down your basket, knowing full well that by evening the spot will be a muddy hollow ringed by footprints, splashes of lye, and cast-off bits of soap. Not so long ago, the riverbank was wild and green, children wading among willows, wildflowers tangled at the edge. Now the grass is patchy, and the wild mint that once grew in thick clumps is thin and bitter. You watch as a frog hops past, aiming for the safety of the reeds, but the water closest to shore is clouded with suds. A duck noses along, pecking at floating scraps, and you wonder how much of the river's bounty has been lost to your own routines. Historians still argue about the environmental cost of medieval laundry. Some claim it was negligible, a drop in the river compared to what would come with factories and cities. Others point to the ways even simple acts, hundreds of washerwomen day after day, could wear down the land, poison the water, strip the hillsides of wood, and drive away the birds and fish that once made the village richer than gold. You can't say for sure, but you do notice. It's harder to catch fish these days, and the birds seem more wary, their songs farther away. You think about the sheer volume of soap you use. Most of it is homemade, lye leached from ash, mixed with animal fat, and boiled down in heavy pots. It's harsh, too harsh sometimes for your own hands, and you've learned to recognise the raw red patches where it burns the skin. When you rinse your clothes in the river, the froth floats downstream, leaving a faint, slick rainbow where the sun hits it. You wonder where it all ends up, and what it does to the plants and animals that rely on the water for life. Then there's the firewood. Every load of laundry means a fresh fire, more branches cut from the hedgerows, more logs felled from the woods. Once, you remember, the forest came right up to the edge of the village, cool and dense and full of secrets. Now you have to walk farther each year for wood, the paths twisting through stumps and brambles where once you ran free as a child. In winter, when every family is boiling their wash, the air fills with smoke and the piles of ash grow higher by the door. Even the tools you use wear out the land. Stones for pounding the linen, dug from the river itself, where smooth and then are abandoned. Baskets fall apart, leaving strands of willow in the grass. Broken wash paddles are tossed aside and slowly rot, adding to the tangled detritus at the edge of the water. You think about the ways people try to repair the damage. Some women, after a heavy wash day, will go back and scatter wildflower seeds, hoping to coax the grass back to life. Others dig shallow drainage channels to send the suds away from the best fishing pools. There are even stories of old men, retired from farming too stiff for field work, spending hours each spring planting willow cuttings along the banks to hold back the floods and the creeping erosion. The stories from other villages are sometimes worse. A cousin tells you about a place where the whole stream turned black every wash day, the fish belly up and the air sour with the stench of spoiled soap. Another friend describes how the women there switched to hauling their laundry to distant meadows to give the river a rest, only to find the grass withered wherever they went. Of course, not everyone sees the harm. Some argue that nature is vast, that rivers have always carried away the worst of human carelessness. Others claim it's the price of civilization, clean shirts, warm beds, and peace of mind. You're not sure which side you believe. The river gives and takes in equal measure. Water for drinking, fish for the table, and a place to wash away not just stains but the weight of the world. A few elders in the village remember how things once were, and they shake their heads at the state of things now. The land remembers, they say. It takes longer than you think to heal. The healer, who gathers her herbs in the woods, mutters about spoiled places where nothing will grow, blaming the lye and ash, the soap and smoke. There are, of course, those who try to do better. Some women have started saving the grey water from their wash, using it to soak animal hides or to water the poorest patches of earth where nothing else will thrive. Others experiment with milder soaps, made from boiled ivy or wild chestnut, though these rarely work as well as lie for the worst stains. You listen and try what you can, but you know you're just one washerwoman among many. Historians still debate whether these small acts of care made any real difference. Was it enough to plant wildflowers and scatter seeds, or was the damage already done, built up over generations of scrubbing, boiling and rinsing? You suspect that every effort matters, even if the land changes more slowly than any single life. As the sun rises higher, more women join you at the river, their laughter and conversation mingling with the soft slap of linen on stone. You watch as someone's daughter pulls up a handful of limp watercress, grimacing at the bitter taste. "It never used to be like this," her mother says. "When I was a girl, you could eat it straight from the stream." You share a look, both remembering better days. Sometimes you wonder what the world would look like if the riverbanks were left to rest. If no one washed, no one burned wood, no one cut willow or dug for stones. Would the water run clear again? Would the fish return? You imagine children wading ankle deep among wildflowers, their laughter mingling with the calls of birds long gone. For now, you do what you can. You carry your soap home rather than letting the last scraps wash away. You gather fallen branches instead of cutting live wood. When your hands are too sore for work, you sit at the edge of the river and weave new baskets from last year's willow, returning what you can to the earth. At home, you pour the leftover washwater onto the compost heap, watching as the steam rises and the scent of lye fades into the air. You remember your grandmother's words, "Take only what you need and give something back." It's a small comfort, but one you cling to on days when the damage seems too great. Evenings by the fire, the stories turn to the future. The children listen, wide-eyed, as you describe forests thick and green, rivers teeming with fish, meadows golden with wildflowers. You tell them about the time you saw a deer drink at the river's edge, unafraid, before the world grew crowded and busy. You hope, in some secret corner of your heart, that they'll see such things again. Historians will go on debating the true cost of medieval laundry, the pollution, the deforestation, the changes wrought on water and soil. But you know what you've seen: grass that never grows back, fish that never return, and hands that ache for the memory of a gentler world. As you finish the day's washing, you pause at the edge of the water, watching the ripples fade. You make a quiet promise to tread a little softer, to teach your children to do the same, to remember that every stone turned and every tree cut leaves a mark, visible or not. You gather your basket and walk home through the twilight, the air tinged with wood smoke and wild thyme, the world a little quieter for your care. And though you know the work will never end, you find a kind of hope in the effort. The belief that, slow as the river's own healing, the land and its people can learn to do better. As darkness falls, you tuck your children into bed and listen to the night birds calling beyond the fields. You know that tomorrow will bring more washing, more wood to gather, more choices to make. But tonight, you rest easy, the memory of green banks and clear water drifting through your dreams, promising that with enough patience the world can be made whole again. You arrive at the river a little later than usual, carrying not just your basket of clothes, but a restless, unspoken tension. Today is different. The women are quieter, their voices subdued, as if the weight of something unseen presses down on every shoulder. There's a stillness in the air, not from fatigue, but from superstition. One of those days when even the most practical among you step carefully and say their prayers a little louder. For today is the spring equinox, and that means something. What exactly changes depending on whom you ask? But everyone agrees, if you wash your linens at the wrong hour today, you might invite something into your home that won't easily be scrubbed out. You've grown up surrounded by these beliefs, passed down like old recipes or lullabies. On some days they feel as real as the cold river water in your hands. On others, they seem like remnants of a world older than anyone can remember, clinging to life in whispers and routines. Either way, you follow them, because even if they aren't true, who wants to risk it? Today, Marta has a sprig of vervain pinned to her apron. Keeps evil out of the soap pot, she says, touching it for reassurance. She won't wash anything white today. White on equinox runs your luck thin as thread, she warns. You nod, though your own white linens are balled at the bottom of the basket. You decide to leave them there, just in case. Superstitions follow every step of the laundry process. Wash at dawn and you'll wash away grief. Wash at dusk and you invite it in. Beat a shirt against a stone on a Sunday and someone in your household will fall ill before the week's end. Spilling the wash water before it's used brings poverty. Folding a damp cloth brings arguments. If your soap doesn't lather properly, it means someone's cursed you. Historians still argue whether these beliefs stem from religion, local pagan customs, or simply the human need to feel in control of the uncontrollable. But to you and the women you wash beside, these rituals provide a kind of rhythm, an invisible thread that links one generation to the next. Even the tools carry weight. One woman insists her wooden paddle must never be left upright in the grass. It stands like a grave marker, she whispers. Another won't use a particular stone near the willow grove, claiming it's haunted by a laundress who drowned herself rather than return to a cruel master. You've never seen a ghost at the river, but you felt the chill of stories in the air, especially on grey mornings when the mist clings to your ankles and no birds dare to sing. You glance at Marta again. She's mumbling a rhyme under her breath, the one about protection from the evil eye. Soap be strong, lie be clear, wash away what we all fear, let no spirit cling or stay, send all trouble far away. You've heard it since you were a child, repeated not only at the river, but before weddings, births, even funerals. Washing isn't just physical, it's spiritual, a kind of warding, a way to set things right that have gone crooked. It's no wonder that in hard times people seek out washerwomen not just for clean clothes but for small blessings. A shirt washed on the right day, in the right way, can be a charm. A handkerchief washed under a waxing moon is said to cure heartbreak. A sheet washed in silence can protect a newborn from the evil eye. There are darker traditions too. You remember the story of a widow who washed her husband's shirt every year on the day he died, whispering a plea to the river to carry her loneliness away, or the tale of the girl who boiled her rival's apron in pig's blood and lye. No one knows what became of her, but the rival's house burned to the ground that winter. Coincidence, surely. But no one has dared to boil clothes in blood since. You were told never to let your shadow fall across another woman's washpot while she stirs it, lest you sour her soap. Never speak a name aloud while scrubbing a stained garment, or the spirit of the person may cling to the cloth. And never, ever let your wash water freeze before it's poured out. It traps the soul of your home inside until spring. Of course, the church frowns on most of this. The priest preaches against the old ways in nearly every sermon, lumping these small acts in with witchcraft and heresy. But he's never spent a full day at the river, never had to bury a child in winter or pray for the return of a husband gone to war. The priest doesn't know the power of ritual. The washerwomen do. Some customs are harmless, even joyful. On Midsummer's Eve, you and the others wash cloths in flower water, chamomile, rose and lavender, then hang them in the trees to flutter like flags. Let the wind carry the bad dreams away, your mother used to say. The children run among them, laughing, believing that if they touch 3 cloths without stepping on a stone, they'll have good luck all year. Other practices veer closer to the edge. There's a woman in a neighbouring village who washes her linens only under moonlight, never speaks at the river, and leaves small offerings, clover, bits of bread, herbs, by the oldest tree. Some say she's mad, others say wise. Either way, her clothes are always the brightest white, her family always healthy. You've never gone quite that far, but today, as you scrub the hem of your son's tunic, you find yourself murmuring old words. Not a spell, exactly, but a prayer. Let this cloth bear his laughter, not his pain. It slips from your lips like a breath, a habit formed from generations of women who understood that the line between the sacred and the ordinary is thinner than thread. Even the stains have meaning. Blood must be treated with cold water and a clear mind. Panic only makes it spread. Ink requires vinegar and patience, lest the words linger in the cloth. Grease needs ashes and anger. Each stain has its own cure, its own lesson. Once, you heard a woman say that washing another person's clothing is the most intimate act you can do without touching them. You think about that as you scrub. You think of the way a child's tunic holds the shape of their adventures, the way a husband's shirt smells faintly of smoke and thyme, the way your own apron carries the memory of a spilled stew and the soft breath of a baby against your hip. Laundry is more than labour. It is memory, blessing, curse and ritual, folded and worn again and again. Historians often overlook these moments. They write about kings and wars, about taxes and treaties, but they forget the daily rites of women, the small songs, the salt thrown over a shoulder, the care taken not to mix the linens of a sick person with the healthy. They forget the ways women carved meaning out of mud, how they found a kind of magic in the mundane. You remember your grandmother telling you that the river listens. It carries everything away eventually, she said, but it keeps a little piece just in case. Sometimes, when the wind shifts, you think you hear her voice in the current. You keep her paddle, old and worn, hung behind your door. You still use her soap recipe, even though others now prefer the faster method with boiled horse marrow. You finish your washing in silence today. A few others do too, each of you casting sidelong glances as the wind picks up and the clouds darken. No one wants to be the first to speak to break the spell. When you're done, you rinse your hands in the clearest water you can find, whisper a thank you to the river, and leave a small offering, a sprig of thyme and a smooth stone, on the bank. At home, you hang your linens carefully, making sure the whites don't overlap the darks, avoiding knots in the line, remembering that tangled drying is tangled luck. The breeze lifts the edges of your sheets like sails, and for a moment the yard feels light, suspended between earth and sky. You watch your children playing, the fresh scent of lavender and lye clinging to the air. You wonder which of these beliefs they'll carry forward, which they'll laugh at, which they'll one day whisper to their own children on laundry day. You hope at least some of it survives. The good parts, the gentle parts, the parts that remind you that even the dirtiest work can be sacred. As the sun sets, casting long shadows over the drying lines, you fold your last cloth and offer a final prayer, not to any saint or god, but to the quiet, unseen forces that govern so much of life. Patience, care, memory, and the river that never stops flowing. By now you know every twist in the path down to the river. You could find your way even blindfolded, each rut in the ground, each dip in the stones, each gnarled root reaching out like a hand to trip you. Your basket's weight presses into your hip with the same familiar ache. The work doesn't get easier, but the rhythm settles into you like breath. Lift, carry, soak, scrub, wring, hang. It's the rhythm of survival. But today, for once, the burden feels light. Not because the clothes are fewer, but because something has changed inside you. You woke this morning to the sound of the village bell, not tolling doom, not announcing a death or fire, but simply marking the hour. It reminded you, you're still here. You survived another week, another storm, another season of aching hands and frayed linen. You dressed without hurry. You packed your washing with care. And as you stepped outside, the light struck your drying line just right. An ordinary moment, but it shimmered. You've started to think of the washing not just as toil, but as transformation. Not magic exactly, though you wouldn't say that aloud, but something close. You've watched grief loosen its grip as a widow wrung out a husband's shirt for the last time. You've seen joy stitched into blankets for newborns. You've witnessed women forgive each other without saying the word, simply by folding each other's clothes with care. There is power here, beneath the lye burns and cracked nails. Quiet, slow, invisible power. The younger women sometimes grumble, "What's the point? It's just washing." You smile because you used to think the same, but now you know it's never just washing. Each garment carries a story. Each act of care is a declaration that something matters. A shirt can be mended, a stain can be lifted, a life can be softened at the edges. There is comfort in knowing that even the dirtiest, most ruined thing might be saved. Today at the river, you notice how differently everyone moves. The women are laughing, not wildly, not with the reckless freedom of a festival, but with the kind of mirth that grows slowly over time like moss on stone. You're all older than you were when you first stood here. Some faces are gone, some voices no longer heard, but those who remain are steady. You don't need to talk to work in harmony anymore. A glance, a nod, a shared sigh is enough. Someone has brought new soap. It smells faintly of sage and juniper, and its lather is thick and smooth. You run your fingers through it and feel the difference immediately. This too is part of the work, passing on knowledge, celebrating small victories, teaching the next in line not only how to scrub and soak, but how to endure, how to find beauty in the work, how to keep going even when your hands feel like they might fall off. You remember when you were the girl with the new soap hoping someone would notice. As the sun climbs higher, you see it catching in the hair of a woman across from you. She's humming a tune, one your grandmother used to sing. It's wordless now, too old for memory to carry all the lyrics, but the melody is enough. It tugs at something deep inside you, something that says you're part of something that began long before you were born and will go on long after you're gone. You think of your daughter, still too young to join you but already mimicking your motions with her dolls. You think of her soft hands, her questions. Why do we wash outside? Why can't we just shake the dirt off? You smile because you know she'll learn in time, not just the how, but the why. The meaning folded into every crease, every ragged hem. It's strange to imagine a world without this. A world where machines hum behind closed doors, where clothes vanish into spinning drums and reappear spotless. Some travellers from the city speak of such things, mechanical wonders powered by wind or water or even fire. They describe hot water on demand, linen that dries itself, soap so fine it smells like honey and never stings. You listen politely, but you don't envy them, not really. You wonder what they miss in that silence. Do they ever pause to notice the weight of a freshly washed blanket in their arms? Do they kneel beside others, shoulder to shoulder, and share stories while their hands work? Do they know what it's like to see a stain vanish under your own effort, to take pride in something saved by care alone? Historians still argue whether the invention of laundry machines freed women or robbed them of a shared ritual. You think both may be true. Yes, the work is brutal. Yes, the aching joints and raw skin are real, but there's something sacred here too, something worth remembering even if the world changes around it. The wind picks up and sends your drying line fluttering like a banner. You laugh. It looks like celebration. You catch a glimpse of yourself in the river's surface, not as a tired washerwoman, but as a keeper of something old and precious. You don't need books or titles. You know what matters. You know what endures. By afternoon, the children arrive, trailing behind their mothers with baskets of their own. Tiny aprons, dolls' clothes, scraps of fabric to practice on. They set up near the shallows, mimicking your motions, giggling as they splash more than they wash. One of them sings the same wordless tune you heard earlier, the melody spreading like sunlight through the trees. You pause to rest. Not because you're done, there's always more, but because rest is part of the rhythm now. A luxury once denied, now embraced. You lean against a smooth stone, warm from the sun, and close your eyes. The sounds around you blend together, rushing water, rustling leaves, distant laughter. It feels like a lullaby. When you open your eyes, a woman beside you is crying quietly, her hands clasped in her lap. You don't ask why. Instead, you place your palm over hers. It's enough. She nods, presses a cloth to her face, then returns to work. You wring out a sheet together in silence. This too is laundry. This too is love. By evening, the washing is done. Lines stretch between trees like spiderwebs, filled with shirts and sheets that billow like sails. You walk among them slowly, touching each one, feeling the softness, the strength. Every piece tells a story of birth, of grief, of healing, of lives quietly held together by thread and will. You gather your basket and begin the slow walk home. The sky is streaked with gold and rose, and the river glimmers like a path. Your shoulders ache, your feet throb, but your heart is full. At your door you stop and look back. The river still runs, the lines still dance, the women are still there, laughing, working, becoming, and you, just one among many, have helped keep the rhythm. That night, as you fold your linens by candlelight, you whisper thanks. Not to any saint or spirit, but to the work itself, to the soap and the water, to the women who taught you, to the stories that cling like lint to every sleeve. Then slowly you wind down. The candle flickers low, the world softens, your breath slows, you let the stillness in. The basket is empty, the day is done, and everything is for now clean, sweet dreams.